All right, welcome to this afternoon's work session. We're going to start off by asking if any commissioner would like to discuss any of the preliminary items for the next BLC meeting. All right, here and next item is a work session discussion items. First one is the 2022 State of the Benefits presentation by Director Pamela Ambers.
Chairman, if the board would, Director Ambers and their team is still waiting for additional personnel to come in. If we can move to the next agenda item until they get here, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Okay, we'll have that again in the near future. Next item will be the fleet maintenance proposed changes. Mr. or Director Jeff Matarko.
Good evening. Actually, you're going to get myself and Chief Murkison. We're going to tag team this because he had a role in it. But it's here to give some proposals on some modifications to our fleet maintenance operation right now, to try to improve it to service the needs that we have in the county. And I'll let Chief open up with the first slide.
Thank you, Director Matarko. Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board. This presentation, as Director Matarko stated, is being brought forth to you tonight to address some efficiency opportunities and a restructuring of fleet maintenance, or provide some options for a restructuring of fleet maintenance to help not only employee progression and satisfaction, but efficiency and sustainability within the space. So my role in this presentation tonight was, as directed by the Chief Operating Officer, in my role as Chief Resiliency Officer for the county. I went into fleet working with Director Matarko and staff and conducted some interviews with employees and kind of did a down and dirty review of current operations and tried to identify some areas where we could create some efficiencies. The main result of those interviews, as I met with the fleet mechanics and some administrative employees, was some of the things we talked about was there was no upward progression within the organization, which affects not only recruitment but retention of our current tenured and dedicated mechanics down at fleet maintenance. No additional incentive to attain additional certifications. A lack of technology was creating the need to do duplicate manual work as it relates to fleet maintenance, work orders, and et cetera. And then, of course, the main driver for a lot of the issues was a lack of materials to be able to complete the needed and efficient work, which is all related to parts. So it was this that started the impetus for this presentation, and with that, I will turn it back over to Director Matarko.
A quick overview of the fleet maintenance operation right now. Of course, we're in charge of servicing all the vehicles, all the equipment the county has in its service right now. That's both in-house or any outsourced to outside vendors, repair body shops appropriately. We're also involved in any additions to our fleet, whether they're replacements or new vehicles, and then the people commonly refer to as the deadlining processing, the removal of vehicles from the fleet. Currently, we have roughly about 1,500 units in our fleet, broken down by almost 1,100 sedans, light-duty trucks, almost 200 medium or heavy-duty trucks, and 250-ish types of heavy equipment. Also, fleet maintenance is in charge of the fuel stations, of course, the main one on Government Circle, plus another 5 satellite locations around the county, mainly at the fire stations. We are unique in that we, by the makeup of the fleet that we have, we kind of operate 3 separate shops under one roof. The sedans, light duty, the medium heavy duty trucks, and then the equipment. They're each their own specialty, all under one roof, obviously. This is our current organizational chart. We have 23 full-time positions, 3 part-time positions. You can see we broke it up by parts department, kind of administrative functions, and then the mechanics and how they break down into different aspects of the units that we maintain. I wanted to give you this as an overview. We also highlighted the areas where T&D, as the parent department for fleet maintenance, the services that T&D provides that the staff in fleet do not provide right now. Obviously, major staff supplement support. You all know we've had issues with our main fuel station, and when staffing has had to manually operate that station, that was T&D staff that was called in. We also do all the procuring of vehicles through T&D to keep fleet working on the actual maintenance aspects. Currently, where we are today, of the 26 positions, 12 are filled and 14 are vacant. You can see on the screen or on the presentation that the highlighted ones in yellow are the vacant positions. So you're at a 54% vacancy in your positions, and that corresponds, T&D is at a 36% vacancy level right now, and fleet obviously being a part of it is 54%. So that's what we're struggling with. We are maintaining the vehicles the best we have with in-house staff, and like I said, outsourcing. That's always something we've always done from the beginning of fleet, and we are currently doing that. There is one specific opportunity that we highlighted is the parts department. Chief Murkison mentioned that was one of the things that came out of his interview with the employees, is the struggling to make sure we have adequate materials. We call it parts in the industry. That's all your maintenance parts, from light bulbs to, it could be even engines at the end of the day, and everything in between. But right now we have all 3 of our positions, 2 full-time and a part-time position, are vacant. So it was the appropriate opportunity time to look into, is there a better way of running that portion of the fleet operation? And we believe there is one that is worthy of consideration. And one of the proposals we have for you tonight is to consider moving forward with what Napa IBS, their Integrated Business Solutions. A little background on them is they basically come in and open a Napa store in our building. It's a dedicated store for our operations. It's right now they are in 2 contracts, Sourcewell, and they're actually on a Georgia State contract. So they're competitively bid this type of service. So that would help, obviously, with the onboarding process. We also looked at O'Reilly's and another organization called the Parts House. They offer the same type of service. They are a lot less robust and established, and they really don't have a local footprint or a footprint in Georgia. Napa is General Parts. They're based in Atlanta. This is what they do. This is a business wing. We went through a lot of back and forth with their representatives to say, okay, help us out. What are the pros and cons on this? Obviously, the first thing is, as I mentioned, all 3 of the positions that are in our parts department are vacant. So if there's a opportune time to consider doing business a different way, this would be the opportune time. Traditionally, over the 8 years that T&D has overseen fleet, it's been problematic to keep qualified people who have a knowledge base of vehicles and inventory in those positions. It's been a revolving door. About every year, 18 months, the positions seem to turn over. And these have been vacant, all 3 positions, one from November, one from August, and one dating back to last July. So we've been essentially functioning without dedicated staff in the parts department for quite a while now. But that's kind of the first bullet there, the existing vacant staffing position. Experience. Napa has been doing this for over 30 years. They operate over 40 locations in the state of Georgia. Clayton County Board of Education has been a partner with them for over 10 plus years, right across the street from where fleet maintenance is. They manage these types of services for probably the largest vehicle fleets you have in the state, is Cobb County and Gwinnett County. They've recently opened up opportunities at Cherokee, Macon Bibb, and Forsyth County schools. So they're eager. This is a business product they do. They're eager to come in and help us. Napa is a vendor we use quite a bit to buy parts from. So now it's just kind of the concept is a internal store instead of the store down Stockbridge bringing in parts to us. It's right in our building. Transactional costs. This is a huge factor in here, and we kind of look at it as soft costs. So it's hard to get very difficult to get an actual number around this. But this is your parts identification, your quotes, your requisition, purchase orders, receiving, inventorying, paying the invoices, which is problematic. This is a very much drastic ripple effect into central services and finance. Central services will probably tell you that fleet, if they're not the heaviest user of requisitions, we're really close to it. So taking the burden off of all this parts ordering process off of county staff is not just fleet. I mean, it's going to have this lasting effect in other departments where they will see a benefit internally from it. So that's the transactional cost that there's a value in there. I can put value, which you'll see here in a couple of minutes, on the positions, but the soft cost out there, I mean, we can throw numbers at it, but at this point, I think you're going to get the drift that this is a win-win for us right now. Part availability fill rate. One of their performance metrics they use is, do we have that part on hand? Cobb and Gwinnett, they are functioning in the high 80s to low 90s of having the parts on hand. Truthfully, fleet right now, our software doesn't track that metric. If I would have to put a guess on it, I would say probably less than 2/3 of the time, and in the pandemic, probably half the time do we have the parts on hand. So there's a time frame to get the part and bring it in. Napa, since they do this for a living, they have found historically when they come into an organization, they kind of give a buyback of about an hour's more of technician time is saved during the day because they have a part there available. And I can get into specifics about, trying to diagnose a vehicle, moving the vehicle out of the bay, moving it back in if you don't have parts. But there's some efficiency there having a part available that you can go put in the car right then and there. Inventory ownership. Currently with the Munis system, there was a change in the county where we have an inventory variance account. There's a value of our inventory that's kept. That kind of all goes away if we choose to go with this Napa situation because they own the inventory. They have their store in our house. So along with the ordering process, the stock supplies that we would do, Napa does all that and they own the inventory. So there's no overhead rate, if you want to look at it from a business standpoint, that the county's putting forth. Napa parts cost reduction too. Currently, the industry standard when we buy at our discounted rates, Napa has told us our rate, their profit margin is about 25 to 30%. Under the state contract, that is capped at 7.5%. So a quick example, if it costs them $100, right now where it's costing us $130 to buy it. If we go under this contract, we will be buying now $107.50. So it's a 22.5% reduction on our cost for Napa parts. I already mentioned the state purchasing. There's no bid required. It's essentially a state contract. You just adopt the state contract and move forward. Cons. Always there's cons. They call them IBS fees. That's their cost of doing business. And when I first looked into this, I was quite surprised that it's very competitive with what we have. I was thinking, you're going to do all this, how exorbitant is this cost going to be? We put on there, I'll skip down to the financials because that really speaks to the IBS fees. Fiscal year 22, we've since kind of updated this, the 3 positions, eliminating them to to have a cost savings to go towards a parts operation is $123,000. That's fully loaded with benefits. With the COLA that was implemented, it's stretching closer to $126,000. Their fees is approximately $143,000 a year. So there's a little difference of about $17,000 right now. Now, of course, that difference, I'll sit here and tell you till the cows come home, is made up in their soft costs and the savings of the time that fleet maintenance and central services and finance are saving from a staffing standpoint. So if we were to put all those things together to make a really sound business case, you will offset those costs really quick. Their $143,000 is payroll, benefits. They have some charges for insurance, computers, and how they operate their business. But their proposal to us is 2 full-time staff members, which essentially we have 2.5 right now. They will they show that they will bring a truck in. So if they have a part, they will go get. If they have a part they need from an outside vendor or another Napa store, they will go and get it and not wait for it to come to us. We call it part running, to go pick up parts. It's an intrinsic portion of your fleet operation is going to get parts. So right now we're looking at a net deficit around 17.4, 17.5, give or take in round numbers, of actual hard costs you can equate. But the benefits extend a lot further than that. Napa has proposed to us that they are thinking operationally they could get up and be operating within 30 to 60 days of having a contract signed. And they're actually thinking it could be shorter because they're based in Atlanta. They have a lot more stores they could pull staff from to get us up and operational. But that's a time frame. This is something that we've toyed around with over the years. Our fleet manager, who a couple of years ago, looked at it when we were down 1 staff member, but they decided with the staffing we had, we didn't want to proceed with it at that point. But with the vacancies we do have across the board, this is one aspect of it that could be stabilized. And if one of their members leave, it's a consulting business, bring another one in the next day. We don't have to go through the advertising, trying to staff up, trying to train people again. I think for the cost difference, this is something that I would strongly recommend you consider that would stabilize one aspect of our operation that's struggled for quite a while now. But with that, I'm going to transition to Chief Murkison to handle the other aspect of the presentation.
Can we take a quick question on just that one aspect?
Yes, ma'am.
The fee of $143,000, is that a flat fee? Does it, as we grow, would we increase in the amount we would be paying as a county government, or would that be the same no matter what?
I'm glad you reminded me, because I did forget one con, because I didn't go back up to the potential net cost parts increase. That 143, I would assume, is going to go up a little bit each year, possibly because of cost of living with employees, because there are employee salaries in there. But that fee is going to stay pretty constant, I would think, with small incremental things. The other fee that we will be paying is they get 7.5% of every part they procure. So that's the second con here. For instance, we go buy a $100 tire right now and it costs us $100. When Napa buys it for us, it'll be $107.50. So there's a cost savings or a cost increase on that side for the non-Napa parts. One of the things Napa did for us is they did an analysis on the top 100 or 100 commonly used parts that we use in the house. And they looked at it over a period of time, and they basically came back and said, you're going to see a savings. You won't see the 22% savings, but they estimate on those 100 parts about 19% savings. Realistically, and quite honestly, if we source a lot of parts without non-Napa, the cost is going to go up. Mm-hmm. If we try to source as many parts as we can through Napa, and they do have heavy equipment and machinery parts, our costs are going to go down. So there is variability in there, but the 143 is kind of a staffing operational comparison to where we are.
Okay. One other quick question on the the fee. That fee does include any costs in terms of fuel. There's not going to be an additional absorbed cost for fuel by them going to get parts for there.
No, they
Using our fuel.
no, ma'am. I mean, I guess we could sell it to them, but no. There's a specific line item in. You will see it if you want to consider the contract, but there's a specific line item in there for a truck, monthly fee, a specific line item for truck insurance, and fuel for the truck.
And that's all included in that fee.
Yes, ma'am. And computers and insurance and their technical support, and they have it broken down from personnel, kind of hard costs and soft costs, and it comes roughly to, I mean, give or take $12,000 a month.
So what I'm looking at is we really don't have any additional cost by the time we add that in, because if you're just comparing salaries to that fee, then yes, but not having to add in, like you mentioned, the truck and additionally the gas and so forth, then it's not costing the county anything at all based upon what you shared with us.
Yeah, I see it as a pretty much a wash right now.
Right.
And then when you throw in the efficiency and the time savings, I mean, we can go in there and calculate another hour's worth of efficiency or another hour's worth of technician time. And I mean, that would offset that cost right then and there. But I'm really curious, when I spoke to both the Central Services Department and Finance Department, that we work closely together with them. They remind us a lot of times we need to do stuff as in pay bills. That's just the nature of the beast. There's a cost savings on staff time in there that is hard to put your thumb on what that's going to equate, but that's going to be that ripple effect where it's going to benefit other departments in the county too.
One more cost question, I'm sorry. With the cost of the equipment that we're purchasing, we are going to continue to have our pass-through status of being tax exempt through them?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good.
Yes, ma'am.
I have to ask, because they're purchasing the parts and we're basically paying them to get the items, so I want to make sure that was taken into consideration.
They leverage state contract pricing, and they also have national contracts that they have as a company. So they could be actually more competitive than what we are able to buy parts on a statewide basis.
Gotcha.
So,
Thank you.
Commissioner Hambrick has a question.
Yes, you covered one regarding the fuel, but the other, now I'm not clear on the employees. Will those two employees be employees that we recommend, or they have their own employees?
they will be Napa employees.
Okay, but we'll pay their benefits.
Well, a part of their fees are the salaries and the benefits.
Okay.
Yeah, they're line item out for insurance and workers' comp, and they have disclosed their costs to us, I will say. They just didn't give us a lump sum. That was one of those things up front. We wanted to see stuff, and they were willing. And actually, the state contract requires them to break it down as an exhibit, and the Sourcewell one does too. Just for reference, the Sourcewell contract, is national. That's based off of 10%. So Georgia gets kind of a hometown discount at 7.5%. So we will definitely, if we go forward with this, we're using the Georgia contract.
Okay, so is that included in the 143?
Yes, ma'am. All that personnel costs, the benefits, it's all in the 143,000.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, Chief?
Thank you. Good evening once again. And if I may, let me give you just kind of an on-point comparison so you can kind of put some context to how this type of system works. One of the other things is Jeff talked about that's really hard to put a figure on is the downtime and some of the other costs that are associated with trucks being down when you can't get parts, whatever the case may be. Well, if you'll recall, back in April, we went live with 10.8, now providing service for all fire and EMS fleet vehicles. So they run a very similar process for their parts where they contract with Napa. We basically get a Napa parts delivery to fleet every day, parts specific to our trucks and our units. So we've gone, since the implementation of that contract, we've gone down from a PM on a standard ambulance taking roughly 3 days to 3.5 for parts issues down to about 5 hours. So what's hard to calculate is what's the lost revenue of that ambulance sitting in a fleet bay as opposed to being on the street, running calls, generate billing, and the revenue. What's the revenue downtime? What's the service delivery downtime? And then as Director Matarco stated, what's the downtime to go through the requisition process to buy a tire, to get a truck back on the road? So there's a lot of things that's almost impossible to put a dollar value on. So when you look at just the part solution alone, yes, on the screen it shows a net 20-ish upgrade for parts, but in reality, when you get down to the efficiency and the manpower and some of the other things that we have to go through, you're probably going to see a net savings at the end of the day. So we've seen tremendous help with just the influx and availability of parts for our units. And being able to have that on the shelf, that's one of the primary things that staff said is if I could just get the part, I could do my job. But once you get a car on a lift, tear it down, now you're waiting on a part, that lift's out of service until the car's fixed. Because obviously they're not going to put it back together and move it, only to have to put it there. But just kind of wanted to give you an on-point comparison. We are running a very similar process with our fleet on it, albeit a smaller scale, but it's proven to be highly efficient and functional moving forward. So to kind of run you through the rest of the presentation here, as stated in the introduction, the following slides relating to structure take into account the interviews conducted with staff and the historical challenges with fleet maintenance. The two options that I will present to you this evening will include a reorganization of fleet maintenance as it remains under transportation and development, as well as an option to return fleet maintenance to a standalone department, which would in turn report directly to the Chief Operating Officer. As most of you know, we've operated under both models at various times throughout the history of Clayton County, so we're going to bring them back for your consideration again. Just a restatement of the current organizational chart showing the current parent responsibilities of transportation and development, and then kind of how that factors down through fleet maintenance. So organization change, which is option A. Proposed option A consideration is a restructure of fleet maintenance with primary oversight remaining with the Department of Transportation and Development. Under this option, the following actions would take place. We would delete the fleet maintenance technician superintendent, which is currently vacant. We would modify the class specification for fleet manager to fleet operations manager, and then we would reclassify the fleet administrator to fleet administration manager. And then we also create a fleet technician career path, which we will discuss in the next slide. But primarily what this does is it deletes the one position and then reallocates a portion of those funds to upgrade the fleet administration manager and then create an equal fleet operations manager. So what this does is streamlines the operations of fleet. It separates the administrative task from the operations task. It leaves the mechanics and the work that's being done under a mechanic type supervisor, and then takes all the administrative oversight to include management of any outsourced contracts, i.e. in this particular case Napa, coordination efforts with 10-8, which is our vendor, and any other outsourced works would fall underneath the fleet administration manager. So it really kind of starts to focus fleet maintenance in on similar structures throughout other areas of the county where we've separated the operations end and the administrative end. Along with this proposal, and you can kind of see that highlighted here, everything in blue would fall up underneath the fleet administration manager. Everything in orange would fall up underneath the fleet operations manager. And then, of course, they would report back, those two would report back to Director Matarco as County Fleet Director in the overall management of the day-to-day of fleet maintenance. Within this proposal, one of the biggest things that I learned in sitting down with leadership down at Fleet and meeting with the technicians is career path, and specifically lack thereof. So as you look at how fleet maintenance is currently billeted or allocated, they have 12 positions available. They're broken down as follows. They have 2 fleet technician 4s, 4 fleet technician 3s, 6 fleet technician 2s, and then 0 fleet technician 1, and then they have 1 allotted fleet apprentice. Under this model, obviously, let's look at just specifically fleet technician 3s and fleet technician 2s. So to boil it down to its simplest point, a fleet technician 3 has diesel engine experience, can work on diesel engines. Fleet technician 2 is mainly your more sedans, your more light duty gas, typical fleet type vehicles. The way fleet operates now is if all 4 of the fleet technician 3 billets are full, there's no room for advancement for a fleet 2. You're not going to attract another fleet technician 3 because you don't have an available billet for them. So it's going to be hard to convince a diesel mechanic to leave a diesel shop that's getting paid off commission to come work at a salary that's beneath what other people who are doing the same work are. And that's just the way that the administration or that it's structured. So the current structure of fleet does not provide a path forward within the organizations. Technicians are hired into a specific class and remain there until an opening occurs through attrition or other employment action. One of the primary concerns brought forth by staff was a lack of progression within the current structure. Additionally, there's no incentive for the employee to gain additional certification and or expertise, as they would not be compensated for the higher level of work performed. So obviously, in an ideal world, we would have all fleet technician 4s. Employee comes in, they can fix anything that comes into the shop, doesn't matter who, when, where, or what is the most efficient model. Right now, that just simply doesn't happen because it's not how fleet is structured. So the easiest way I can explain this and what we're asking would be simply to get rid of the fleet technician 1, 2, 3, and 4 and just have 12 fleet technician positions and create upward progression based off levels of certifications or the skills that they're already bringing to the table. And I give you a prime example. So if you look at how the fire department is structured, specifically just taking into account our firefighter billets before they start getting promoted up into officers. I don't have a set number of EMTs. I don't have a set number of paramedics. I don't have a set number of drivers or anything. I have 196 firefighter billets. Where they fall within that structure is based off their level of certifications, and it's broken out as you see on the screen. So they come in at a firefighter recruit, entry grade 19, step 4, making $45,830 a year. As soon as they graduate the academy with firefighter EMT, they're eligible for a 5% step increase, which takes them to a grade 20, step 4. If they go gain their relief driver certification status, they get a 10% increase, go to a grade 21, step 4. Or if they go to firefighter paramedic, they go up to a grade 23, and then they bump up to a step 8. So when the minute they come in the door, they know if I want to progress within this organization, I go get certain certifications, there's going to come with that a certain pay increase. There's an incentive for the employee to go get additional training, which makes that employee more valuable to the county and to the organization because they can do more skills. What we're asking to do is create the same structure at Fleet. Make it to where the employees have the incentive and the drive to go get that additional certification, that additional skill, but in return reward them to be able to move up within the organization so we don't continue to struggle with recruitment and retention of fleet mechanics because they have this logical path forward where they can get additional pay, additional incentives through a structured program, much like you see that we have at Fire. And it serves very well because if the employee wants to move up and progress, you've given them the blueprint. It becomes up to the employee to go after and do it. The other thing that allows us to do is through a more robust marketing plan where we're going after those diesel mechanics, we're going after some of those more sought after folk that are making commission or that are getting the high-end private dollars. This allows us now to bring them in at the advanced step and at the higher pay grade so we become more attractive. We're not just waiting on an employee who may still have 5 years to retirement, so we won't be able to bring in another diesel mechanic until somebody retires. That's just not an effective or efficient model for us to be able to handle the volume of fleet that's coming through fleet maintenance right now. And quite frankly, it's a lot of what led to our need and drive to go out and outsource our fleet because of just how technical our fleet has become in being able to attract that certain level of mechanic. So being able to provide that upper level of progression, I believe is going to pay dividends to not only Director Matarco, but the ability of this board to attract quality mechanics to help support the staff we have, but then also give our staff at Fleet is incredibly dedicated. The ideas they brought forth were tremendous. I had fantastic conversations with every single one of them, and they just want to do their job. They want to do it efficiently. They want to enjoy what they do, and there's some roadblocks in the way. Parts being one, technology being another one, and just that upward progression. They want to learn. They want to get additional certifications, but they want to be paid for it. And I don't think that's too much to ask given the workload that we're asking them to fill. So that's option A. Looking at option A, once again, these numbers are close, but can still be dialed in. And Jeff, do these numbers account for the 3% or no? Okay. So based off of these numbers as we sit, we're at about a plus or minus about $150, $200 of this being a net neutral proposition, taking into account the cost savings of deleting the fleet technician, making the changes to the 2 positions we talked about, and then adding the career path. enhancements. And then, of course, with the outsourced parts department, assuming that was a $20,000 plus net that was still left there, we still just about wash even under option A. Okay? Option B, nothing changes at the bottom end. The only thing that changes is it adds a fleet maintenance director. So everything that we just talked about as far as creating the two, an administrative manager and an operations manager, that stays the same. The fleet technician career path stays the same. The only thing that's different between A and B is this assumes adding a new fleet maintenance director. That's a proposed grade. That's not necessarily fixed, but this would now become a standalone organization, which is what it was at some point in time in the past. So when you look at those costs, all the costs are the same as was under option A. The only difference is the expense of the added director's position.
Can you take it back to the?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So that's really the only difference between option A and option B is one remains under fleet, the other one adds a new fleet maintenance director. And with that, I'm going to kick it back to Director Matarco to let him walk you through what his requests for next steps are.
So as you can see, there's kind of two parts to this presentation. The takeaways I want to leave you with is the parts department about is that a potential that the board is interested in? If so, we can bring back through Central Services Department the annual contract through the state for adoption, and we can proceed forward with that, obviously. Then the second option, or the second aspect of it, is the restructuring. I mean, always you have the choice of do nothing. I mean, that's intrinsic on any decision-making process you go through. But working with the COO, I think we've proposed two viable things for your consideration. The timing isn't the greatest on this with the budget process and the COLA, so there's some refinement that needs to be done on those things, obviously. Some interaction with HR about specifics in the job descriptions and what is this going to look like within a non-public safety realm of the billets and how that works. It needs to be flushed out. So if a preference is provided about which option is the direction you would like us to proceed, obviously we would sharpen the pencil on some of these items, get with HR department and refine it with the COO and bring back a refined proposal to you based off of your preference today.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
I want to first say thank you for your creative outward thinking. I think this is the best time for this. I have worked, of course, with Clayton County Public Schools. Delta Airlines also has
Yes.
sources out through Napa Auto Parts and Forsyth County Schools. And it has been a win-win situation. If you go back and speak with the people in those organizations, they will tell you that there has been a great savings. Also, those obsolete parts that we really don't use anymore, that's going to be a great savings for us as well, because you don't have to worry about, if we need those parts or not. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This is excellent, and I would love the career pathway. That is going to be definitely great, especially for our kids from Clayton County Public Schools. They need to be able to come into those different positions, and we need to be able to provide that for them. So again, I think this is going to be, I've been through this before. I've seen this, on a first-hand situation, working with our transportation department in Clayton County. So they would be a great department to kind of talk with and just see how things go as far as Napa is concerned. But again, thank you for your creative outward thinking, and I know this will be great for our county. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Can you speak a little bit more about some of the identified indirect costs, employee downtime, machine downtime, vehicle downtime, and uptime? I know it seems like there's going to be an increase in productivity because this appears very much like a just-in-time type of model.
The industry is based on a just-in-time delivery. I mean, we do get good service from Napa. It's not instantaneous. We do get good service from O'Reilly's and other places too. But when you I'll try to present this as easy as possible. You bring a car into a bay, you put it up on the lifts, you try to diagnose what's going on with it. You have to remove parts of it to figure out what is wrong. And if we have theirs in-house, then you get the parts, you put them on. If you don't have them in-house, if it's a 2-hour delay to get it from Napa, if it's a 2-day delay, we have to make a decision. Do we put the car back together, the time, to take it out of the bay, or to bring in another car in to do the same thing, or does it just sit there, essentially shutting down one of our bays of operation? So that's where you get into Napa's estimate of a time of an hour in an 8-hour day is get put back into more of a production stage instead of a twiddle your fingers kind of wait, or the downtime of putting wheels and tires back on the car so you can roll it out. That's one aspect of it. And then the soft costs about, I really don't want to get into our purchasing code. We could be here all night about that, but it's a just-in-time item. We have so many different models of vehicles, so many different parts of brakes and rotors. We can't stock everything. You have to rely on just-in-time delivery, and our procurement code just does not set up for us to do that. So we have workarounds, and it's helped on the time frame. It's killed fleet staff. We're doing 3 and 4 times the amount of work to buy a part and get it invoiced and get it paid. And then it would be too easy to sit back and say, well, let the procurement process go through its course for a couple of days, and then a vehicle will be out of service. We've done that and taken the burden on the staff to get the vehicles back into service.
So on option B, with the addition of the fleet director, would they be the one kind of tasked with handling that portion of it? Or
They
is that
would
more
oversee
overall
the whole
thing?
department.
Okay.
Well, for me, it's about cost savings and efficiency. And anytime we can save taxpayers' money and make sure that we are putting vehicles back into service, especially on the public safety side, then it's well worth it. Again, I think and I appreciate the presentation and all the forethought that went into this. The 2 options. I guess this board just needs to really try to figure out what direction to go into, whether or not have another director, or go with the restructuring of the fleet department. And I know that's a policy decision, not asking
Don't
your
ask
opinion
me.
on it. I'm just stating to the board that that's something that we'll have to think through. But again, I think either model will provide us with a level of efficiency that's going to be beneficial not only to the employees but the citizens.
And I've worked through both.
Okay.
I've worked through both,
Yes.
through both systems. I've worked through both.
Any other comments or statements?
Yes, I remember you working through both, and a vice chair. I think I met the previous director. But the point is on this, there's one other thing that we have to take into consideration on the board, and that is sustainability. Efficiency, effectiveness is important, but what's most important for us to be able to affect our community even further is the reorganization, because now we're creating sustainability. So just the mere fact, Chief, that you all, Jeff and Chief, brought it in here, that we can now create that pathway is huge. It's not just for right now, but in terms of just bringing a director in, that person's going to be there, you know, in that role. But like you said, it doesn't change the upward mobility. And what we want to get to is the point to where we're not only cycling our resources in terms of financial resources, but the resources of our students, of our children in this community, so they have a place. So this is amazing, but once we get through this, I would love to see that model in other areas where it would fit. And I think that we are really going to become a self-sustainable community. That's positive. It's generational changes.
Any other comments, questions? Gentlemen, thank you for the presentation. I'm sure we'll be polled and asked about a model, because that's the option as to how this board wants to proceed. So thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we're going to have legislative priorities update for fiscal year 23. P,
Chairman,
G,
Chairman,
yes.
we still have one.
There
We still have one what?
The first one, don't forget, we're gonna have to come back to the first one.
Oh, we're gonna do the first one? I
Yeah,
thought you
there
said
was-
we weren't gonna do it.
They were waiting for somebody to show up.
We'll come back to them.
Yeah, gotcha. All right, board. As we've probably done the last couple of years, we've tried to ensure that we provide legislative priorities to this board, not only providing context about things that this board has seen as a value from a build-out standpoint, but also we utilize it as kind of the linchpin to give it to our state delegation about things that we also like for them to work in conjunction with our lobbyists around. So we have a presentation by Don and by Howard, Ohio River South and Peachtree Government. We'll provide you an update on some of those things that we think might be viable as a legislative priority for the board, and more importantly, try to get some prioritization from this board about what we should be providing to our delegation, in which you're looking for some sense of what this board would like to see by Friday of this week. So again, I'll yield the mic to Howard, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Stanford, and thank you, Board of Commissioners. One, I just want to commend you all on inviting us back. We were here a little less than 2 months ago, actually reviewing the outcomes of the 2022 legislative session shortly after the period for the governor to sign or veto bills had actually elapsed. And I want to commend you all because it's so important that we take full advantage of the off-season, as we call it, and really prepare for the 2023 session with full input from you and your constituents about what we want to focus on and really how the General Assembly and the constitutional offices are going to change come November and then January of next year. So one other thing I want to do before we jump into this presentation, I know you guys are working on getting it up on the screen, is just to introduce our growing team of advocates. We're really proud that we've been able to bring a diverse group of folks down to the Capitol and over to your meetings as often as you guys would like, because we know how covering 236 members of the General Assembly and a lot of other stakeholders it's a full contact sport and takes a lot of folks. So if you guys will, come on up. Jennifer Larosa is someone you guys may not have met before, but she has been active in the General Assembly for years and has a tremendous wealth of experience in local government representation, and you'll hear from her a little bit later, but she just joined the Ohio River South team. You also met Artine Afshar the last time we were here presenting in May. She also is someone that we took note of a couple of years ago and invited to join the Ohio River South team. And then you guys would know Mr. Tyler Lewis, who's been with us, I think, since the beginning of this engagement and has provided a ton of really great support and knows your issues well. And then Mr. Don Bolia, who is no stranger to anyone here. So just want to make sure as you see us here, but also as you come down to the Capitol and see us moving around the great state of Georgia, that you know the full complement of the team that is at your disposal as we go forward. I see you guys are still working on the, I'll say one other thing as you guys are working on the AV aspect of this. I mean, you just can't overstate how important it is that we come together and get a real sense of what your priorities are. And we appreciate being invited to your Friday meetings where we get to hear from your leaders from across the county and in different departments about the things that are both challenges and opportunities for the way that they deliver services to the constituents of Clayton County. And we hope you guys continue to invite us to those because it really gives us a little bit of an early warning system for legislative issues that we might need to look out for at the Georgia General Assembly. So
just a couple other things to dovetail what Mr. Franklin said. We were directed by the chair and by your county administrator to sort of give you an outline of priorities. So this should be a working document. So it should be something that we can change and evolve. My understanding is that the delegation reached out to the chair and the county administrator indicating that I think it's the 29th of this month they'd like to see our priorities in advance so they can look at it and study it before the January General Assembly comes into session. But at the same time, I think they also understand that things can evolve, lots of things can happen in the next 5.5 months. So there may be things you want to add to it. So what we try to do is give a framework to give you some flexibility and talk about things in some general terms so that you're not stuck with, well, you didn't give us your priorities. So hopefully this gives you some flexibility when you're presenting this to the delegation. And of course, we'll be working closely with the delegation. As you know, 2023 is the first year of a 2-year biennial. which means everything starts new. They elected a speaker, which will probably be the current speaker, but the delegation's also new, and you had a reapportionment on top of that, so you have a slightly different delegation. So we don't know who your delegation chair will be. That's something they're going to have to elect in January. So we're certainly working with the existing delegation and the existing chair on all of the formalities that have to occur between now and January. So we just want to let you know where we are logistically. So again, we wanted to talk about things in general terms, so we want to make sure we included lots of things. And one of the things that we've done in the past year and a half or so ago was work with you and your team, your staff in particular, on specific agencies that are important to Clayton County. There's obviously money that flows from these agencies, so we wanted to be careful to watch for those dollars. And Representative Bernot in particular had some very strong feelings about not only the Department of Public Health, but also BDHDD. So we had arranged for some of those meetings with those administrators and with those department heads, with some of your key members of your legislative delegation, and we would encourage you all to take a part in that if that is something you're interested in, and we can certainly arrange that. So one of the things we want to put in the priorities that we want to ask the delegation to do is help us continue to build those relationships with not only those agencies, but also some of the chairs that will direct and a lot of the policy for those agencies. So we also included Representative Sharon Cooper from Marietta, who chairs the Health and Human Services Committee in the House, and Ben Watson, who chairs it in the Senate. Because again, they are members of the delegation, these are colleagues, and a lot of these issues are nonpartisan. So even though those are Republicans and members of our delegation are Democrats, they have the ability to reach out to those members, and so that's something I think we can ask them to do and help us to do. And certainly, as your lobbying team, that's one of our big focuses, is helping you to continue to build those relationships. One of the things I'd like to see us do is have the chair and your key staff, Administrator Stanford, talk and meet with some of these legislators directly and meet with these department heads directly, because they need to know what's going on the ground here in Clayton County and why you need the resources and how the resources are being spent. And the better we build those relationships with the department heads, the more likelihood you'll get more funding for whatever projects you're doing. So we wanted to continue to build that strong relationship with you, your staff, and the department heads. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, and I'm sure you guys have questions and comments for these. I did want to take us to the next topic here that has had a lot of interest over the last couple years, and that is exactly how the state and local jurisdictions go about pursuing economic development and the regulations governing economic development bodies like development authorities. Just in the last couple years, but in last year in particular, there's a flurry of legislative proposals around development authorities, some that are seeking to have or insist upon additional transparency and bring additional stakeholders into the process as it relates to tax abatements and the like, and others that are looking to further the powers and really the reach of development authorities. Really, in the last year, probably the most impactful piece of legislation that we're looking at and we're chasing at this point is the Senate Study Committee that's going to delve into some of these issues that get meted out through the legislative session. And as you guys are all very well aware, I mean, the 40 legislative days is rarely enough time to kind of dig into all the nuance for the proposals that are put forward. And so study committees are very important. Oftentimes they are put forward when a piece of legislation is not successful, but there is sufficient energy and political capital invested into studying it further. And so we're going to be watching the study committee on development authorities going forward. But there have been some meaningful legislative proposals put forward. We've talked a bit about those when we came here in May, and knowing that economic development is a priority for Clayton County. We've also interfaced with members of your leadership team to figure out ways that we can prioritize the county's priorities and make sure that the General Assembly is very well aware of what those things are. And then I think the other big issue on this slide is resolving some of the uncertainty around leadership in the sheriff's office and what that means from a public safety standpoint. And one thing just worth noting in this case, you know, everyone thinks of the General Assembly and the state legislature as the 236 members, right? The 180 in the House, 56 in the Senate. But just as important oftentimes are the constitutional officers who have authorities invested in them and the ability to influence or use the bully pulpit to resolve issues like the ones that we've seen sometimes here in Clayton County. So we're not solely focused on just 236 lawmakers, but also on the constitutional officers. And as Don mentioned earlier, all of them are up for re-election this year, so there may be some change. We've actually got a couple retirements as well that may change the landscape as we pursue some of these issues. Did I miss anything, Don?
Just two things real quick. Coming in September is the Gita Conference, which is the Economic Development Conference in Savannah. If you're not sending someone from your development authority, I really encourage you to do so. You'll have Pat Wilson there, who runs economic development for the state, and it's so crucial that Clayton County has a direct line of communication with the state, especially with Pat Wilson and his folks, because those project managers are directing a lot of these projects, and they're making decisions on where they're going. And if they don't get quick responses, they don't feel like they're going to get some cooperation from the local level, whether it's tying in a local abatement with what they're willing to give on the state level, they'll often look over some jurisdictions. So it's really important that you all have a great relationship with the Georgia Department of Economic Development, and I really encourage you to attend that conference in Savannah in mid-September and send your folks there, because it really is a good conference. I plan to be there. I don't know if anyone else from our team is going to be there, but I plan to be there as well, and certainly be working on your behalf at that conference. Yeah, I'm going to be there.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is your slide.
So this is another issue that I know we've talked about when we've had an opportunity to present to the commission, and you know, we don't want to beat a dead horse in this case. I think we have had some really meaningful updates, and they've come from a variety of different places. You know, the legislation that impacts taxation to the state capital comes through the Ways and Means Committee, and we've actually had, I think, in the last year, some positive updates around this particular discussion, because we've had changes in the leadership of that particular committee, and we expect to see more changes in the makeup of that committee going forward into 2023. I think when we were here in May, I think Don presented the slide that showed that we were going to have at least 53 or so lawmakers not return to the General Assembly for the 2023 session. And I think something like 30 of them had some leadership post, a chairman or a vice chairman of a committee of jurisdiction that mattered to us. And so, you know, we really have pursued a two-pronged approach as it's related to building a stronger, not only relationship, but also a more fair and equitable division of revenue from the city of Atlanta, Hartsfield, Jackson, with all the things that came from the repeal of the jet fuel tax. And so I know, Dietrich, you can talk a bit about some of those things, and have had some recent meetings, but we've also been working both the legislative track, where leaders in the Ways and Means Committee have signaled some interest in trying to get us on a stair-step approach to building to, you know, the revenues that we lost probably 3+ years ago, both for the county and for the school system. And we've continued to pursue those discussions to hope keep the pressure on and the heat on, as you guys have also discussed how there might be remediation made from the city of Atlanta specifically. So, you know, there's a lot to talk about here, and I know many of the discussions have already taken place, both with the administration, the new administration, and including us. But one of those was about building for additional economic development to replace some of those lost revenues through the tax base. I saw an article in the HAC just the other day that talked about how all the climbing residential and commercial valuations are bolstering, in some cases, some of the local governments that are looking for more ambitious plans to serve their constituents and to meet a whole new host of challenges that have come out of this pandemic. So we stand at the ready to discuss all the options that are available to us. And again, I just want to underscore a lot of opportunity to do that when we do it outside the session, because we can, you know, without all the pressure and being on the clock of the General Assembly, actually make the ball move here. Don, anything to add?
I just want to mention again and reiterate the importance of the Ways and Means Committee. I think Chairman Shaw Blackman has proven that he thinks very differently than his predecessors. As evidence, I'm sure you all saw that the Tri-Cities was able to pass a MOS tax. That would have never happened under anyone else's watch. It was directly tied to him looking at it and looking at the facts and determining that it didn't matter what the partisan issues were, that this was something that was important in that community. So I think he looks at things very differently, and I would encourage us to continue to meet with him. I know the county administrator has met with him, but I think we need to keep having those meetings. He's very open to those things. And so as we progress along the next 4 or 5 months, I would encourage us to meet directly with them. Chairman Turner, you may want to participate as well. But it's really, he really is an open thinker and an opportunity for us to really look at different things, whether it's the airport or other issues that affects your taxing ability.
Absolutely. Just one note, your bullet or number 1, I think you got the from and to twisted around.
Okay. We apologize for that.
From the airport to
You're a better editor than us, than we are.
So we talked a little bit about this already, and just as a word of caution, I think when we came before you in May, we acknowledged that there are some forces moving to advance some of this legislation, and that these are not one-time legislative proposals. So as Don mentioned before, we're starting anew at the beginning of a new biennial. So I think November 15th is the start of pre-filing for the legislative session. From that point forward, and even before, we'll be watching to see what gets pre-filed and whether or not there's going to be interest in bringing this bill back in front of the General Assembly. But again, as we said to you in May, we'll reiterate it now. November is going to change a lot of both the institutional knowledge and some of the priorities that have been front and center at the General Assembly over the last 2 to 4 years. And so we're also going to be looking to read the tea leaves and taking full advantage of that, the remainder of November and December going into the January 2023 session.
And one thing we want to mention, or did you want to talk about this? Is that when they create a study committee, what that allows them to do is spend a lot more time to really expand on that issue. So over the next 4 or 5 months, the General Assembly, specifically Chairman Max Burns, will be convening meetings, and he's really looking for input from everyone. He's going to be looking for input from Clayton County and all these other local governments that deploy development authorities. And our ask for you is for you to give us some of your staff time so that we can ask them to testify before these committees as they're coming up. And they'll probably be all over the state. Senator Burns is from the southwest Georgia area, so you can bet he's going to probably position something not necessarily convenient to Clayton County, but there usually will be at least one in Atlanta. So we do encourage you to give us some of your staff time so that they can come and testify and make sure they understand the importance of development authorities and what they do for the county.
Next slide.
Okay. Did I go too fast? There we go.
So both of them have kind of stolen my thunder a little bit on study committees and the reasons that they come about when a bill loses some steam. And that's exactly what happened with HB 1093. A lot of elected officials found that their local jurisdictions put a lot of pressure on them to not restrict their powers to do that. And going into a study committee, there's going to be a lot of discussion. And both sides of that battle last year had some pretty passionate points to move the needle one way or another. But I think it's going to come down to the legality of what you're capable and required to do on both sides. And what they did not mention previously is most of these study committees, that season starts in August. So we're about to roll into a season that will inundate you with information on these committees and require some feedback back, or possibly come to the table to put some opinions in there and have your voice be heard.
Oh, this is not, okay. We mentioned this before, so we think this bill is going to come back, and this is pretty important because what you're finding is, especially in the home builder development community, there are a few jurisdictions that have been very difficult for them to work in. So they're trying to make it easier for them, or make it a more streamlined process on how they pay fees, and limit the ability for local governments to structure how they charge these permitting fees. And some of these could be very, very onerous on Clayton County. So this bill did not pass. We suspect it's coming back because I think that the home builders and the contractors and the development community is going to push it pretty hard, but it would severely limit your ability on how you determine what fees you're going to charge and how you collect those fees. So this is something we've been watching pretty closely, and we want to put it on the radar for your delegation to make sure they know to watch out for these bills and hopefully oppose them. So that's it. That's the end of our presentation. We're glad to take any questions. And again, thank you so much for all of your time. And Howard, if you want to add anything at the end.
No, thank you. I guess the only thing I would say is that this is an open dialogue, right? We've made this presentation. I think we've been informed by the conversations over the past year, and now 2 years representing you, but we know that there might be other things out there that you're aware of that we might want to elevate as our priorities, or other input you want to provide to us as we prepare to do your bidding and your will down the General Assembly.
All right, any questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Franklin.
First, I want to say it's good to see you, Jennifer. Met Jennifer when we first started with the ATL and getting that up and going. Did an amazing job. Great hire. Very smart, and glad to have you. But I wanted to go back to the fees. I wanted to make sure that Howard, you, and Don, right, that you all are aware that Clayton County currently only has the Water Authority impact fees. So we are now in the middle of that impact fee study because we're a little bit late to that table. But at the end of the day, we are getting there. So just kind of keep that in mind, and I think that will cause for us to really stay in tune. The good part is we're dealing with our Chief of Resiliency, who has been doing a great job on that project for us. So I think that we'll be able to continue to move forward. So keep that in mind. The other thing is the build to rent. I think that's really, this comment is more so to the board. I think that we can also not only leverage you all as our firm, which y'all have done an awesome job, but I think this is an opportunity for us commissioners to make sure that we build those relationships with some of our friends on the north side of town, because we know oftentimes those are the ones that are really affected by it. When you go into the southernmost parts of the state, they're just glad to have something that at times where people can live in, because as we know about economic development and so forth. But I believe we did have a lot of success in pushing things back for the last couple of years through our association with ACCG and our folks up in the Forsyth County area with Cindy and them, because I'm gonna tell you, they were really adamant, as I don't have to tell you, about not letting this go through. But that was pretty much all I had for that. And then I do want to add this one thing that we have kind of dealt with here in the county, but and it kind of hits home a little bit for me. We have some of our, let me go back. So we've now changed our policy to where if there is a project coming before us that's not fee simple, and they have to designate it as either fee simple or if they're going to bill for rent, and we have to go through the approval process. Well, before, what we've ended up with is a couple communities have skirted around our zoning laws. And so they've built, let's say, a condo community that's supposed to be fee simple, and then actually that same company, which you know the name of, because I heard them talking about it at the Builders Association, McKinley Homes specifically, they got out of the country investors to come in and then turn around and sell them to their own investment company and rent that same fee simple project out as a apartment community. And so therefore what they're doing is they're messing up the FHA mix on those homeowners in that area, number one, and the percentages that you have to even be able to sell the home or buy new homes. And number two is the fact that you've turned a purchased community into a rental community without having to get your business going through the community development, so that we could receive all the noted taxes that are due to this county. That's something I want you all to keep in mind as we're moving forward, because that's something we've got to fix. It's really a burden on our community, on code enforcement, and we've got to figure that out.
Any other questions?
I would just add that having listened to those particular committee meetings, those anecdotes would be very useful going into that study committee as well. If you couldn't be there personally to share those, we would be happy to put them in.
I'll be glad to be there, and I'll be totally transparent. I personally was affected by it as well.
Commissioner Ham.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think I heard something you all mentioned regarding the jet fuel tax, and I'm not sure if this was in your presentation, but that concessionaire fee that we used to get or whatever, are you all working on either one of those?
Yeah, so not to replace, but yes, we have been working along. I said 2 lines, but I think we've actually been updated by your federal lobbyists and been made aware that there's also federal legislation being advanced by our senators here in the state of Georgia. So yes, we have been all over it, and really trying to leverage each piece of our any leverage we've been able to build against the other. So, just to give an example, with our chief operating officer here, we have been sharing what legislative outputs have come from Chairman Shaw Blackman in Ways and Means, and his willingness to provide some sort of, recompense to the county, and then trying to make sure that those updates are provided to the folks at the City of Atlanta and decision makers at the Department of Aviation, and vice versa. And then also, obviously aware of what our senators are doing to advance, a piece of legislation that would fill this gap and really, call all of the account holders to account on behalf of Clayton County and the school system. So yes, is the short answer. I think we've been doing it, as best we can across a number of different jurisdictions. So again, you guys have another advocate at the federal level. We've been working really closely and been involved and made aware of meetings happening at the local level in terms of partnership, and then we're also trying to advance at the state capitol as well.
Okay, great. Now, what about on the concessionaire side? We had a bill, Senate bill, sometime back from, I believe it was Butts County Senator or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Senate Bill
Can
399.
can we work on that?
Certainly, Commissioner. So, as it pertains to that Senate bill where it was talking about foregoing the jet fuel tax, but also about ad valorem taxation is what you're talking about specifically. What we're trying to do now is use through our local discussions with Mayor Dickens and his office, as we talk about a potential pilot program with the city, is we're trying to figure out ways for which we can get back to the fold to get the compensation that we've had prior to the concessionaire agreement going away. And so we're trying to see if the city will intervene to help us with that. So therefore, we're not always dealing directly with the state, but also working with the jurisdiction and control to see whether or not we can levy that to bring in additional revenue to the county.
Okay, great, because we were collecting, things were going smoothly. I don't know where this guy came from with that deal. So, yeah, but if we don't forget that, if we would work on that.
No, that's
that revenue.
top priority.
Yeah,
We've
that
definitely been
revenue.
working on that, as CEO said with Mayor Dickens. We've had a meeting or two. He's very open to dialogue and discussion, so we have been talking with him back and forth.
Okay, well, I would like to be in on that since the airport sits in District 2.
I concur.
At least the south terminal and the international terminal.
It's been preliminary discussion, but we'll definitely make you part of that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. So at some point in time, I know you all are starting a list of what we wanted to, so you all want us to provide feedback as to what we want to see on that list. And then we'll either put it, when I've done it before, we've done it in a pamphlet or something like that, or just list it on our website of what you want to see. Or what we want to see as far as those priorities.
Yeah, and I think Clayton County, so thank you for the question. I think Clayton County's had its own process, because what we heard from Chairwoman Bernot is that there was also a community aspect of this process where, the meetings was set and, input was solicited, and it was provided to the commission before ultimately an agenda was solidified. And so that's literally the reason, Commissioner Anderson, I wanted to commend you guys to begin with. I think, taking advantage of the summer months and getting ahead of this process is really important and impactful, especially with all the change we see coming. But your question, you answered it already. We definitely want to have something we can refer to say, here are the priorities. And again, I think Don alluded to this earlier, the way that the General Assembly works, 2,000 bills in a 3-month span, we'll get many pieces of legislation that will touch upon your priorities, but they may not answer those priorities directly. So having as much feedback as we can gather now before we're in the hustle and bustle of the General Assembly is always very helpful. And then the ability to come back to you and say, hey, this proposal gets us 75% of the way there. Are we saying no to it, or are we saying yes to it in the moment? So anything you can provide to us now or over the course of the next several months is very helpful.
And the reason why I ask that is because I've always taken a list. If I'm going to DC to speak with the congressman and things of that nature, I have my legislative priorities list, and I take it in there and say, this is what we need for our county, or this is what we need for our school district, and this is our legislative priority list. And I think that would be great for all the commissioners to have. That way, we'll have something in hand to show, and it can be viable for what we want as a board. So,
perfect.
Commissioner, good point. I just wanted to add, the idea today was to kind of frame out what those legislative priorities could be for the board.
Okay.
And it would be my ask of the board if we can take what our lobbyists have provided us today and utilize this as a platform to send as a preliminary component to our state delegation, because they had a date of July 29th as far as getting information in. It will be my goal to have this on an agenda for next Tuesday for the board to ratify those legislative agenda items, and then we'll prioritize those based upon as the board sees fit, would be the ultimate goal.
Okay, and
Okay.
I'll send those in, the
Yeah.
ones that I have.
Yes,
already.
ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
One little quick cleanup note. First of all, again, thank you for everything, and I can't thank you enough, Franklin, Mr. Franklin, for the amazing job that you have done on behalf of our county. You all represent us so well, and I know that now we have turned the heads of a few people at that state, down at the Capitol, because we're on one page, and you all have worked through some of the bumps and the bruises to make sure that we're all on one page. That means a lot. But with Commissioner Anderson's recommendation, one little note, we need to look at changing or bringing it before the board, the meeting where we are able to lobby during the January, February days, when all those other counties are there lobbying. Since I've been a commissioner, it's my 6th year this year, we always had a board meeting on Tuesday, and I always had to miss that board meeting because that was important for me. One, because I had that list through the ATL where I had to meet with our Congress members and the Senate on the U.S. level, but also we need to be there collectively as a board.
Yes.
So we just approved our schedule, but we do need to go back and etch that date out if we can, because we know the time frame in which it happens if the board agrees.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Again, thank you for your time, very informative, and look forward to keep on moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right, next up is Pine Brook Apartments Code Brief, Blitz Briefing. Chief Murkison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the board. Good to see you again.
Been seeing you in a while, Chief.
I'll be brief, but I wanted to bring forth an update on where we were with the Pine Brook Apartment Safety Blitz that took place earlier this week and then into last week where it all got started. So the impetus of the Pine Brook Apartments Code Enforcement Blitz were concerns brought forth by Commissioner Franklin after a video appeared on social media depicting gang activity and what appeared to be, from what we could see in the initial video, as multiple code violations. Code violations depicted in the video ranged from quality of life issues to life safety code violation issues. The mission statement for the response to this was to assemble a multidisciplinary task force of code enforcement experts for the purpose of addressing public/life safety and quality of life threats to the citizens of Pine Brook Apartments. And pictured here is that team of multidisciplinary field experts that went out and helped us address the issues that were brought forth. Quick timeline of events. On Saturday, July 16th, 2022, members of the administration team received an email from Commissioner Franklin with the attached video. That same day, research and collaboration began between the public safety executives, myself, Warden Nelson, Chief of Police Kevin Roberts had already started kind of collaborating between ourselves, going over a history of the complex between our agencies and what needed to happen next. On Monday, July 18th, 2022, there was an incident action plan briefing with those same public safety executives. That same day, Monday, July 18th, 22, a Blitz plan was announced to the team to take place Tuesday, July 19th at 0900, with a pre-meeting and a safety briefing set for 0830 that morning. And then Tuesday, July 19th, 2022, the safety and security briefing did take place at 0830 at the regional training facility, and that was followed by an unannounced code enforcement blitz once the torrential downpour subsided. So we did not start at 0900, it was more like 10:30ish. But we didn't want our folk out in the rain and or lightning. So President, at that briefing meeting, the executive leadership team representative from the Board of Commissioners was Commissioner Felicia Franklin, Commissioner DeMont Davis, and Chief Staff Attorney Charles Reed. Representing the Operations Division under the guidance of Dietrich Stanford, COO, was myself as the Chief Resiliency Officer and Director of Fire and EMS, Kevin Roberts, Chief of Police, and Dennis Nelson, who serves as our warden. And what I wanted to make sure that we called attention to tonight and recognized was that dedicated multidisciplinary team who actually went out in the field and conducted these inspections, went into these units, identified these residents. So I wanted to make sure that we did take a minute to recognize from each division the team of the boots on the ground, led by Captain McDonald from the Clayton County Corrections Division. And you can kind of see here on the screen all of the dedicated code enforcement officers that were out there to help us with the inspections. Representing Clayton County Police Department under the leadership of Captain Michael Green, you can kind of see here who brought forth. Not pictured here or not listed here was Clayton County Police with support from my tactical medics also did an initial security sweep of that complex before any of our code enforcement or fire enforcement officials entered the complex. They also swept each vacant building to make sure that they were clear ahead of any of our employees going in. So there were some additional officers on site from Clayton County Police that helped conduct those security sweeps based off of what we gathered from the video that was provided. And then finally, representing fire and EMS, members of my executive command staff were in the field along with members of the Fire Marshal's Office, Operations Division with TAC Medic support and the support of Engine Number 7, and then the Emergency Management Office and our communication offices. One of the things that I wanted to bring forth is in all, we were able to bring together 43 individuals from 4 separate county departments, were mobilized, briefed, and carried out a very detailed mission all in less than 72 hours of being notified, with the bulk of that happening over the weekend, taking place on Saturday and Sunday, with the operation being briefed on Monday and carried out on Tuesday. So I would like to thank my public safety brethren for jumping on board with the leadership of this county to make this happen. The mission objectives were clear and simple. There were 3 major mission objectives as we started this process, was to assess the level of gang activity that was currently going on within the complex, assess the fire life safety code violations that were noted in the video and beyond, and then also assess the quality of life violations that were noted in the video and beyond. As it relates to the gang activity, Clayton County Police Department was able to determine that these videos are common to surface where vacant property exists. There were similar videos from across the country available on this particular producer's website. A review of the video by Clayton County Police Department. There were several leads that were generated from the video that is being acted on by the police department, and I will let Chief Kevin Roberts speak to that if so necessary. And then there were some other areas of the county that were also mentioned in the video outside of the initial complex, and that was Valley Hill Road and Highway 138 and Taylor Road, and they are following up on those revelations as well. As it relates to violations found by Clayton County Code Enforcement opened 11 new cases on the complex. Violations of county ordinance and the International Property Maintenance Code make up the bulk of those. All in all, depicted within the 11 cases were 41 violations that were noticed, and most prominent was CE 22-8090, which was an order condemning building 700, which was one of the vacant buildings that was out there. As it relates to Clayton County Fire and Emergency Services, members from the Fire Marshal's Office identified 6 new violations of county ordinance via the International Fire Code. Primary categories, I should say 6 new categories. There were more than that of violations, but fire extinguishers, open junction boxes, servicing of hydrants and fire mains, excessive storage in vacant buildings, smoke detector issues, and the complex was given 7 days to clear the most egregious violations, which was the excessive storage in vacant buildings. This complex was nearly due for its normal annual inspection, so we went ahead and completed that while we were out there, and then started a new enforcement clock on them for the violations that we were able to uncover. Just to show you a few of the existing conditions that we found, some of these were highlighted in the video, some of them is what our inspectors uncovered. As you can see, one of the primary things that we found is building 700, which was the vacant building, was being used as a storage locker for evictions. So as people were evicted, they were not disposing of the belongings, they were just cramming them into the vacant building. That creates obviously a fire load hazard for not only the building itself and the buildings around it, but for our first responders that have to go in and mitigate emergencies within these structures. You can see stuff was piled high to the ceiling, and then of course the image to your far right is just a closet that was full of black mold, which obviously creates some environmental hazards. What I did want to make sure that I highlighted is the efforts of the complex thus far since we've been out there. As I stated, we gave them 7 days to correct a lot of the egregious violations that you see here with the fire load. The complex has acted on that, so I wanted to make sure that I gave you an update. I think today concluded their 7th day that we gave them, and they're roughly about 90% done. Dumpsters are an issue. Trying to get them. They filled up, I believe, 7 roll-offs already out of what we gave them to do. So we have every reason to believe that they will finish up here in the next day or so. One of the things I wanted to show you, as I stated, was current conditions. So you look at Unit 713 before. This is one of the units that was being used as eviction storage. This is what it looks like today. As we went back out there and took the additional photos. Unit 709 before, that was also being used, and this is what it currently looks like today. So the complex has taken our action seriously. They're taking the necessary actions to remedy the code violations that were brought forth, and we will stay on them until all of them are remedied and the building is back vacant and is back secured, which is also in accordance with the International Fire Code. And then code enforcement will continue to work through their processes for remediating their code violations and making sure that the rest of the issues, quality of life issues, are also taken care of and remediated. But this was a large issue. It was a large effort. We could not have done it alone. It took a village, as you saw on the screen, of 43 dedicated county workers. So my hat's off to each one of those leaders and their organizations. And with that, I will answer any questions, or I will defer to a colleague most quickly.
Well, not only does it take a village that was shown on screen, but it looks like they're here tonight as well. So I'd definitely like to extend our thanks and gratitude for the hard work that you put in, as well as the leadership. So I applaud each and every one of you. Any other questions, comments?
Yes, I have to say, thank you is not even enough, because this is something that we've been dealing with since for a very long time, but it came to my attention back in 2019. And I know for certain there are a lot of folks that are really happy that they're no longer living in those conditions. Citizens are emailing our office every day about issues in this complex. And I want to say thank you to you, Chief, because it took you to organize it, as you stated, within 72 hours. And thank you to every one of the departments, particularly code enforcement, because they've been dealing with it over and over again. Captain McDonald, and I see Major Amy back there. And also thank you to our Clayton County Police Department. There was one gentleman that stood out the most. I don't know his rank, but Officer Stewart did an amazing job. Just as we were receiving the briefing about the video, you were telling us about it, and then the chief was stating that they weren't sure when that video was filmed. And immediately, Officer Stewart said, it was filmed 4 days ago. I've got intel to know that. And not only did he do that, but he went further to be able to back you up to make sure that everybody was safe and everybody knew how to come in and go out. Our code enforcement team had been dealing with this for a long time. Our police department, Captain Palmer, has been dealing with this a long time. We convened meetings, and what we realized is we had to have more teeth. And you coming in to really put the foot down has helped. Now, there were a couple things that we learned, and in fact, Commissioner, you've already stated, but Davis was there. And unfortunately, we learned that we don't have all the hazmat uniforms that we needed at that time. So for code enforcement, you know that is coming. We've already talked to Ms. Rogers, who's gotten with you. So for those that saw the gowns on the pictures, they'll go in with a little bit better PPE supplies, which is protective supplies next time. The other thing that I noticed is that we've got to pull in the other cities as well as our state as federal folks. And commissioners, the reason I wanted this to come before us is because just the week before I had sent an email to the entire board and everybody. City of Atlanta is moving forward with an investigation into this same apartment complex owner. It's just not one that they own in District 3. They own them in other areas in Clayton and other areas in the city of Atlanta. So just like we came together to deal with this issue across the board, we got to also pull in community development. I don't know, Mr. Jiki, if you've been briefed, because I know I'm sorry you weren't there that day. But I've also talked to Perrine, who works with Senator Ossoff's office, Warnock and Ossoff. They got to get involved too, because these owners are out of state. We only have so much reach. We only have so much that we can do to serve them with the notice of violations. Captain McDonald does an awesome job, but his jurisdiction doesn't go beyond Clayton County. So we got to follow back up on that and add it to our list of things that we need to deal with on those priorities, and then tweak our things here so that we can make sure that they're sworn in to be able to serve those warrants.
Any other comments, questions?
I'm just gonna also state those registries that we talked about, making sure that we do it for rental assistance and rental properties as well, doing it for the apartments as well. So we need to put registries together so we will know what we have in the county and who we're dealing with as far as being the owners.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Anybody else?
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to go back and piggyback off of what Commissioner Franklin brought up, at the conclusion of this, we did have a further conversation with Director of GK and County Legal to try and figure out, okay, we took care of the immediate threats and the immediate hazards, but now what? And then we talked a little bit about it during the safety blitz, which is how do we now tie this into policy lens and looking at, are there certain policies, procedures? We know what the thought is that we can do, but what can we actually do? And if that's not getting us what we need, then what do we need to do to bring forth from the operations to the board to consider those policy changes? So I'll flip that to Attorney Reed and let him take it from there.
Awesome.
Good evening, Chairman and so the very no. So this is building off of what Chief Murkison provided. And so what I wanted to do is just give it very quickly, kind of give an overview of what our business license process, because one of the issues that came up in the email is why does this apartment complex have a business license in the first place when you see those kind of conditions. So we'll talk about that really quickly, talk about our nuisance abatement process, and some proposal, policy discussions, and some next steps. So very generally, I'm just going to summarize. It says that every owner of a business needs a business license, and they have to file an application and pay a fine. Pay a fee and a tax to be effective on the first day of January of each year, and that's Section 22-28. 2229 provides that, and I'm summarizing, that they have to provide a sworn application. In other words, the information that they provide has to be accurate, has to be before March 31st of every year or within 5 days of the start of their business. It's considered late if that application comes after March 31st. There's a reserved section, which I will come back to in a minute. Section E says the department has to issue the license if the federal, state, and local laws have been met. In other words, if they jump through the various hoops as far as registering the Secretary of State, those types of things. They pay their tax or fee if they're current on real or personal property tax. Currently, under our current code, the community development does not have authority to withhold new or renew business licenses for quality of life violations. However, once a business license is issued, the license can be revoked or suspended by the License Review Board. So they can revoke or suspend a business license or alcohol licenses for many reasons, and I'll run through a few of them. These aren't all, but for conviction of 3 or more county ordinance violations within 12 months, failure to pay a business license fee, taxes, or other fees after 30 days notice, failure to take reasonable precautions for safety of patrons, employees, or public and business operations, creating a public nuisance based on the number of calls for police response, and that's more than 20 in a 6-month period, failure to maintain property in compliance with the county code after notice and a 30-day opportunity to correct. And the LRB also has power to fine up to $1,000 per violation. This license review board is what this board put into place back in 2019. They have the power to revoke licenses and suspend license for up to 1 year. And the initiation of that comes through the chief of police, the warden, or the director of Department of Community Development. The consequences of a suspended business license is that that business owner cannot legally do business in Clayton County during the time of the suspension or revocation. So if this is an apartment complex, then obviously the residents will not be legally permitted to reside at that complex during the suspension or revocation. So there are 2 proposals. First, we can, as I mentioned, there was a reserved section in 22-29D. We can add an additional eligibility requirement for obtaining a business license. And what it would read as a proposal is that in determining whether or not any application shall be granted and a license issued, the Department of Community Development shall consider whether the applicant and/or licensee has violated any county quality of life codes contained in Article 2, Chapter 62 of the Code of Clayton County as amended. We could implement that. That language is similar to what's in our alcohol licensing code for their in their consideration, 6-61. I'm going to give you 2 proposals. I'm just going to run through a couple of questions that the board, if we were to enact this, is there a number of violations that the community development should consider prior violations they should consider before saying this business cannot get a new license. Should a pending violation count as a consideration? So if, for instance, if a person applied in February, if they have been cited just the week prior, there hasn't been an adjudication of that yet because it hasn't come before the court or code enforcement board, should community development consider that? And then how does the board want to handle renewal of an apartment complex business licenses? Because as you can imagine, if they go for grass too high, noise ordinance, other types of things, if you set a threshold number of we'll say 10, you could easily get 10 in a month. And so do you want to then say that they cannot renew their business license in a year if you do that? Again, denying business license will require relocation of those residents at that location. If we go proposal 1, there are some budgetary impacts because you will have to have code enforcement for all of the licenses that come through. They'll have to then run and check and see if any of the proposed applicants have violations. I mean, they'd have to just check the computer, but there is some budgetary impact, and there's also some legal risk, which I won't go into in detail here. The second proposal is that we don't make an amendment to the code. We allow the LRB to continue to revoke or suspend licenses on a case-by-case basis. Part of that is that the LRB ordinance already sets a threshold number of prior violations. So if they have 3 or more in a 12-month period, and there's a reason to believe that this license should be suspended or revoked, you can submit something before the LRB to do that. They have the opportunity to hear evidence and give that licensee an ability to defend itself. They also have the ability to enter into binding agreements to resolve issues. And there's less of an immediate budgetary impact because the license review board is already present, and less legal risk, which I won't go into here. So they're kind of opening questions, discussions on those 2 options. Whether we want to amend our code to add that, and if so, what do we want to put in place, or we just go with what's there and just use License Review Board. And Director Gita is here to talk and if through any other practical implications of either one of those.
One of our dilemmas, by the way, good evening, Chairman, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. One of the dilemmas in a housing complex has always been, if you revoke the license and to stop them from doing business, they have to leave the premises. It creates displacement, and if not handled well, causes its own problems for the county. That has always been the reluctance. How do we implement forcing folks in our apartment complex to move once you do that? That's one of the issues. But if we can, we've been trying to work out what is the proper way of doing this in occupied apartments. But if we do the requirement of code violation to business license for new businesses, that's no problem, because you don't have any residents in that complex, or you don't have if the property has violation prior to coming in, you can enforce that. But the only issue becomes when you have that residents in it. By doing that process, we also have to anticipate the delay in processing, because you have to, we're not the only ones who issue violations. You have 3 county departments that can issue violations that we have to check to make sure either the applicant is not unduly being restricted, or we are making mistakes by approving things we're not supposed to approve. So these are options, because when we go to a place, community development department aspect of the issues that are happening is this a business? Why are they still operating? And what I just said about the apartment has been an issue. That's why we have been having several meetings in the quality of life committee as to solutions in code as to how to deal with it. One of the things that we talked about is having apartment complexes paying for their own yearly inspections. I know that in a rotation format, where if you have an apartment complex, you do 1/3 of the complex for any given year. The next year is progressive. The next year, you cover the other 1/3. The third year, you do the other 1/3. Then it starts all over again. That process does not negate any of the things that fire does or police do. It's just that we want to make the apartment managers or owners be responsible for what is happening in their complexes, where they submit, and they have to submit it from a reputable inspection company. Not just one thing they give us, it has to come from a reputable inspection company to do that. I know that fire have some apprehension about that, but it doesn't affect what everybody else is doing. It's just another layer of holding the property owners responsible for their complexes. When Attorney Reed gets into the abatement process, we'll get into if we condemn an apartment, what happens after that? So.
I know what happens after that.
Okay, if
I'll talk about that in a minute, but it's, before I moved on to that part, I just wanted to make sure the board didn't have any questions.
Yeah.
I do.
Commissioner Franklin.
Yes. First, thank you so very much, and I'm so glad that we are finally moving forward. Number one, I do know that you said that the new business is not going to be as much of an issue. That's great. But as we're talking about this process, I think it's imperative that we understand we're not talking about having to relocate people because we don't like the blinds or we don't like the color of the door, the way the door closes. We're talking about relocating people who are living in the conditions that we saw. Because that mold didn't just begin at that point. And at one point, believe it or not, there are people even living in those boarded up areas with no electricity and cooking outside. I've got the emails. I've been showing it. So we're not talking about just relocating folks because, well, we got to think about it. We need to put some teeth down so that we can pull folks out of danger. No matter how much you can afford to pay, you should never have to live in the conditions of what we're speaking of. So that's what this conversation is surrounding. Secondly, I think that we have to, again, rely on the health department, rely on our fire department to be able to provide us with information and say, hey, there's a health hazard. Then again, we don't have to think about, do we relocate them? And that goes back into our process of the code. That's not an issue. It's all of our responsibility. The other thing I want to bring up is that I think that as opposed to looking at a tunnel and putting it as one option or another, what we need to do is a hybrid approach. Why? Because there's a disconnect between the board, what's that board, the license review board, and your office. What I mean by that is because you all are working in silos, I got people on that board and y'all haven't even met. And there's no way in the world we can have our county looking the way it looks and all these violations and that board not even be meeting more often. So I think that we have to have a hybrid approach to where we do look at the code, make it where the code triggers certain actions as it then engages that committee. And then also there's easy opportunity for us to pull out, not for violations of grass. We just got to dig down deep and make it happen. It's not one or the other. We got to make this happen. People should not have to live in these conditions. We got too many blighted places in our county.
Commissioner, we agree. The issue with what you're suggesting is personnel and funding. Let's talk the realities here. Is the moment you do that, the moment you execute exactly the way we have ideas of what could work legally and funding-wise. Because if we evict people or figure out a way to evacuate people, call it not evicting, we're evacuating them, we're rescuing, which might be a better word, we're rescuing them. You still got to put them somewhere.
I'm clear, but what we're talking about is, Mr. Dickey, I just want to define for the board. We're not talking about a situation where we're just thinking, well, do we, don't we? We put the meat in the teeth and the language to where the code addresses these severe violations where nobody has to live in that space. The other real quick point is it doesn't, I don't see it right now requiring as much personnel, and that's not a concern for me because we help in people's lives. But you got to remember, we got to get we have systems so that when if somebody goes in and put in that system, it should pull up a file, a data. That's simple, it flags it, that's system management. So we're just adding that step to review, because at the end of the day, we shouldn't have to convene you all to say, well, we issued this business license because of this, and there's not enough meat in it, but yet and still PD is getting 1,000,001 calls, taxing our police officers, taxing labor, taxing our citizens with code enforcement. It's all costing us money. It's costing one way or the other. So we just need to make sure it's legal, that we can move through and save folks, and make sure that it's strong enough to where we're not reissuing something because they've had 20 grass violations. That's not going to impede somebody's life like black mold and the things that we saw in these units.
That you've raised a great point, and what I was separating the first issue dealing with the issuance of a building permit.
Right.
What I'm going to talk about is the other issue about the nuisance abatement. So I'm putting that side separate. So using Pine Brook, for instance, you've got, I don't know, say 10 or 11 buildings.
Right.
Of those 10 or 11, you may have one or two that are, we'll say they aren't all of them aren't all in a terrible condition. But if you say the business license needs to be pulled, that affects all 11 buildings, not just the ones that are at risk. And so that's the point I was making, that there's a reason why that apartment complex had a business license, because that business license can cover all 11 buildings. Now we can put something in place to say, well, if there's a handful, then we can address that, but I'm going to address the quality the blight and nuisance abatement in just a minute, but I wanted to make sure that that the county was operating in what the board wanted to see from the entire business license prospect. Okay, so I'm gonna move on. We can come back if there's additional questions. So this is really more of an informational aspect, and I want to, because I'm gonna hand this out. This right here, I'm gonna talk about very quickly, is the county's nuisance abatement fast track protocol. And I'm not gonna take credit for this, handing this to you, because we've got a historian and a great legal mind in Ken Green, who who knows where all the bodies are buried, so to speak. And he was able to pull this up from 2012 and provided this to me. And so, again, in 2000, and a lot of this information is coming from him. So in 2012, and I'm providing this to you so that when citizens call you and ask you, what does the county do about nuisances, you have something right here in your hand that has been done, so you can answer questions. Of course, you can always refer them to me if you need to go into any of the details. But just in short, 2012, the county adopted this protocol to fast-track nuisance abatements. He said from 2001 to 2012, before this came, the county abated 2 houses to his recollection. Since 2012, the county has tracked 139 cases with 122 closed as of April 18th. Since 2020, the county has not had abatement hearings in court due to COVID-19. So very quickly, this is all outlined here, but I just wanted to kind of set forth the process for the citizens to know. There's a complaint and investigation of an issue. It takes roughly about a month to go through, giving that owner notice, opportunity for them to correct the condition before it moves beyond that next stage. That you already saw how that happened with Pine Brook. We gave them notice, they corrected it within 7 days. If they did not, then we would file a court action. There's certain statutory requirements that we have to give them, hold a hearing within 15 to 45 days, give them time to correct the action. If they don't, it gets an order for demolition. By the time you do that, and these are the timelines that are in here, so there may be some flexibility on how long, but we'll say 1 to 2 months to prepare for demolition. The actual demolition, perhaps a month. After the building is demolished, there's a lien that's placed on the property. Take us roughly a week to file that. Again, this is based on this timeline here. Close out, total time, roughly 6 to 9 months to take a property that is non-compliant from standing to clear cut and filing a lien. Currently, the county does not budget for abatements, and that fiscal responsibility for this entire process is shared among code enforcement, legal, building maintenance, transportation and development. For the court costs, any abatement of asbestos, and the cost of demolition. And in fact, one of these demolitions, 555 Battle Creek, cost more than $500,000, and I believe it required HUD funding. So again, just to kind of, this is more for informational purposes. Nuisance abatement is a lengthy process, has various state standards. And so while a particular building could be considered a nuisance, the time corrected, it can be a long process, and that one building itself designated as a nuisance may not qualify to categorize that entire complex as a nuisance. Again, this is really for the citizens, but just so that you all know that as well. And then once a court order is issued, that building will be designated unfit for human habitation, and residents will be needed to remove from the location if anybody is living there. And we've seen that occur with City of Atlanta and others, where they've had places that were really terrible, and the city worked with the property owners to try to figure out a way to get them moved out. So the next portion, just for the board's information is that we will be updating this fast track proposal. As you see, this references the police department being responsible for code enforcement. That's been changed through this board's policy to have refuse and the warden. So we will update to reflect the current structure and provide more accurate timelines for how long it will take everything to be done. I've already spoken with Magistrate Court, and Chief Judge Wright Hill has already indicated her willingness and ability to resume setting hearings. So that process should be getting back on track. And again, I'm just putting some questions out here. If there's anything that the board wants to see as we're going through that process for how frequent abatement should be used. Of course, when we see it and it meets the standard, it will go. But these are just some things for discussion purposes.
Yes, I do have. Would it be feasible for us to begin to put together some type of study committee to begin to really review the many types of scenarios that can come out of this and update this accordingly? This, but also any other programmatic kind of documentation or processes that we should put in place.
Sure. I mean, we already have a quality of life committee that meets regularly to talk about these type of issues. Certainly, as part of our work sessions, we can come before this board and talk to you all about what we're seeing and what we're putting together, and making sure that the board is aware and has input on what we're seeing from enforcement or as an enforcement standpoint.
Because in the conversation that's gone on, and I think it's healthy conversation and good points have been made, but I see a whole lot of decision trees that we've got to begin to address with this.
Well, one way to make it fast-tracked is, again, use others who've paved that road before us. And you all have done that great in the past for a lot of other things that we brought before the board as a resolution. It was just a best practice, and then tweak it to our specific, number of parcels that we know we have issues with. Again, this one's not rocket science. Let's just put it in terms. We talking about, we got 2 buildings that's standing. One has mold. We got to get through this quick. Unfortunately, we don't have time for a study committee for this because we got to save, again, people's lives. We have to decide whether we're going to go through the process or if a process will allow us to tear those buildings down, because it begins to affect people around them, not just the ones that used to live in that area. So,
and the reason why I provided this to you is that we have something in place to be able to take care of that, and we'll make sure that we look at that, make sure if it meets the process to be able to pull down, we'll go ahead and we've got the court back in place to be able to set those hearings and move forward on this quickly.
perfect.
And Mr. Reed, you talked about the quality of life violations and things of that nature. We need to start looking at, changing that part where we can start dealing with that, ahead of time, and with these different apartment complexes and things of that nature. That way, we can deal with those violations, they can get it together, and we can move on, so.
And I did want to speak to one thing quickly. We cannot, as a matter of law, create a rental registry.
We can't, okay.
No. Unfortunately, the state said that that's not something that they will allow a jurisdiction to track. We can do vacancy, but as far as who owns rental property, that issue is taken out of our hands.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anything else?
There was something you were asking, and I put a little note on it, but you were talking about being able to move forward quickly. Oh, don't forget that we can tweak it. So while we're talking about study group, we just tweak it and then keep going, get it going.
So quickly, our next steps, because I know we've been here for a little while and we kind of sprung this part on you, but we can come back to you and talk about whether we want to, or whether you want us to amend the business license ordinance to implement that, and we can maybe tweak what types of things might trigger when we would need to not allow someone to have a new business license. We can come back to you with that. In any event, we will certainly update our fast track protocol and provide that back to the board, an updated one. And then if there's any requests from the board that they'd like to see implemented, certainly let us know.
The other thing we didn't do, I don't know how we left commercial code enforcement separate. This is important. I won't belong this meeting, but this is very, prolong it, sorry. But this is very important. We are dealing with the fact that we got 3 different departments. And you all should all be talking to one another anyway. So what we had to do was we had to separate, we had to bring in the ability to have everything housed through corrections. But the problem is we left commercial separate. That's got to come back together. It's not working that way. That's gonna allow you to have more teeth too.
Anybody have anything else? Thank you, appreciate the presentation. Look forward to hearing back from you. Have a good day. All right, let's go back to the top of the agenda. 2022 State of the Benefits presentation.
I wish we could have held this one.
Good evening, Board of Commissioners, Chairman, Vice Chair Hambrick, and Commissioners, and also good evening to our Clayton County citizens. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to present. I know that it's been a long night. Our employees and retirees' health benefits impact our ability to get the medical care that we need, which can literally mean life or death. Human Resources tries very hard to do our best to serve our employees and retirees, and to ensure that their voices are heard in regards to their benefits needs. We have established a benefit committee to serve as the voice for our employees and retirees. And as a matter of fact, the committee, members of the committee were here earlier, but we did go ahead and release them. Karen, I don't think anyone else is here. We do have, thank you so much. We do have one committee member who is still here, but we did go ahead and release them. We also have our wellness coordinator. I want to thank the board again for approving this position. Edward Lance is our wellness coordinator, and is Edward still here? Okay, Edward just left. But his mission is to establish a culture of wellness among Clayton County employees and retirees. And thus far, he's doing a great job. But I do want to say that we have our benefits committee, and I want to say publicly how much Human Resources appreciate them being in space, and the fact that they stayed throughout this meeting until they were released certainly speaks to their commitment to serve as the voice of our employees and retirees. We have asked our consultant, MMA, to provide a state of the benefits presentation to the Board of Commissioners. Often I've heard the sentiment that we've got to get the benefits right. It's important that Human Resources strategies align with the Board of Commissioners strategies. We're hoping that this presentation will offer you all some great insight as to where we are, and just give you a good overview of the state of our benefits. I also want to say that this is an unbiased presentation. Human Resources was not involved in any aspect of collecting the data or pulling the presentation together, and I'm sure that MMA will do a great job and present a well-rounded presentation to the board. So I'll step aside and we'll introduce Mr. Jack and his team.
Good evening, and thank you for your patience. We left our office at 3:50 this afternoon and got down here right at 5:30, and we were a few minutes late, so I apologize to you for our tardiness. I'll take note and leave 2 hours earlier next time around. But we did prepare diligently for our time together this evening, and July the 1st marks our second anniversary of being in service to the county, and I wanted to pause and say thank you for the opportunity to be of service, and also recognize what a tremendous responsibility it is as well. In terms of an agenda, I want to do some introductions. We have some new team members that I wanted to introduce you to, as well as an expanded team. Over the last 2 years, we have introduced all of our centers of excellence for the benefit of the county, and so I'll talk more about that. We also are going to talk about positive focuses, not only for 2021, but also for 2022. Maureen Rosen on my team will come up and talk about progress that we've made over the last 2 years, and also some areas that we'd like to see some improvement on with your help as well as some 2023 strategies. We are very busy right now preparing for the renewals, and so we're going to share some ideas there. And then we have a few minutes, although I'm conscious of the time, for questions and answers as well. Have you been given the handout? Very good. So myself and Rory Callahan with Brown Financial Group are the strategy and day-to-day overseers of our team. Maureen Rosen, our Vice President of Account Management, is here. And Angela Wells is new, although she has 20 years of experience in account management and also works on your account. And then Tanisha Gamblin is 20 years in the business, an underwriter by training, and has also been assigned to the account as well. So it's not just one person or two people, but it's many teams or many people within our organization that help support your account. Marsh McLennan Agency has a number of centers of excellence, and over the last 2 years, we have been able to implement all of the teams to work on your account. And by way of example, in the top right-hand corner, our PATH data analytics team, Dr. Maston, our medical director, and his entire department look at, on a very granular basis, your claims experience, and then they provide oversight and counsel regarding recommendations on how to make your overall population healthier. You're going to see that in just a minute. Our RX Solutions department consults on your pharmacy spend. Generally, the pharmacy cost for prescription medications are 20 to 25% of the overall spend for your healthcare plan. So we have a department that looks just at the pharmacy spend and negotiates the best contracts and arrangements on behalf of the county. We have a stop-loss department that markets your stop-loss insurance for your self-funded medical plan with Anthem. We have 10 carriers that we have in our bank, and very competitive offers there. Actuarial Services looks at all of the pricing for your plan. We do your renewal projections, and we present that to Human Resources before we ever get the carrier renewal, so that we have our underwriters look at it before Anthem and Kaiser Permanente, by way of example, their underwriters look at it. And then our Compliance Center of Excellence as well. Chris Beinecke is our National Compliance Director. He has 8 ERISA attorneys on his team, and we provide guidance and counsel regarding legislation. Most recently, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And what does that really mean? We hosted a national webinar on that for human resources professionals and the implications of that legislation. So we do bring a powerhouse team of professionals in these various departments to bear for the benefit of the county. Jessica Brown, our Director of Health and Well-Being, has been very involved over the last 2 years in helping to guide the county in terms of the creation of your new wellness plan. Betsy Noda Kirby also sits on the PATH team and was instrumental in helping bring Edward Lance in terms of his job description, in terms of the interviewing, and also the initial training. Dr. Maston, as I mentioned, is our Chief Medical Officer and oversees the entire data analytics team. Chris Beinecke in Compliance. Eric Nettlekoff is our Regional Director for Pharmacy. And then Bridget Chase is the Senior Health Actuary and Manager of that department. So we work with all of these various departments in order to bring the most favorable arrangements on behalf of the county. So some positive focuses for 2021 and 2022. About a year ago, June the 1st to be specific, we negotiated with New York Life to rewrite your life insurance plan, life and disability plans. There was an annual savings to the county of about $346,000. We also enhanced the benefits to include a $25,000 occupational accident benefit and an additional $25,000 for law enforcement officers' benefits for the enrolled employees. And we also negotiated a $50,000 reoccurring technology fund to pay for the benefit administration system on behalf of your employees. We gained approval from Anthem right at the end of the year for them to pay $68,000 towards the cost of your wellness program with Sonic Boom, your current administrator. And we also negotiated with Kaiser right at the end of the last year to pay $40,000 out of the wellness funds to prepay for the administrative fees for your Weight Watchers program. You're going to see in a few minutes why those particular programs are important, primarily because of the health of the county. As I mentioned, Betsy Noda Kirby supported the interview process for your wellness coordinator, was instrumental in writing the job description and also helped with the training initially. And then we track, and to give credit where credit's due, Maureen tracks rather intently the pharmacy rebates that are due back to the county as part of your pharmacy program. So in 2020, those pharmacy rebates totaled about $453,000. In the most recent year for pharmacy claims incurred in 2021, it'll be about $566,000. And all of those rebates are received quarterly, and they're deposited back into your claims account, into the county's claims account. And then finally, in working with Aetna, we discovered that some pharmacy rebates had not been released, and so recently there was a credit back into your account of $344,000. So we're constantly looking for ways to save the county money, to make sure that you're receiving all of the money due in terms of the negotiated contracts, and so we feel like we've had some pretty good success there. So I'm going to ask Maureen to come up and talk about the progress that we've made in 2021 as well as in 2022.
Thank you, Jack. Good afternoon. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and distinguished board. Thank you for having us, and again for extending your grace to us for coming in at the minute you were just about to begin. But I'm going to take you through just 2 slides. These are slides that are easy to present to you because they come with a lot of pride, both from my heart and Director Amble's heart. This is something super important to us and to Director Amble's and her HR team, as well as the new wellness coordinator, Edward. This is something we take very seriously, and it's all about the health of your employees at Clayton County. We think that your program should be one that is outstanding, one that is a differentiator between all of the other counties in the surrounding areas, which is why we think when we compare ourselves to peers in those other counties that we will be seen as the center of excellence, the best of the best, the program that people want to be engaged in and they want to pay attention to when it comes to their overall health and well-being. Lots going on about mental health right now, and so we want to look at that whole holistic approach and provide those employees with all these different resources and ways to get engaged and getting healthier by eating better and minding their weight, and pass that along to their families as well. So one of the first things that we did was a study of many different vendors to determine which one we wanted to do business with, which one had the same goals, and we're going to be able to meet those expectations that the county had in delivering a wellness platform. So after looking at several and interviewing them and looking at cost proposals, the board, and thank you for that, was very gracious to agree and approve the launching of Sonic Boom. It is a wellness program that is independent of any of the insurance companies they're working with. So it's freestanding, and it goes with us even if we change carriers. And it's one that supports your employees to get them engaged in their health and fitness activities. Those are things that consist of contests. There's daily emails that go out that encourage them to participate in contests that are going on, wellness activities, biometric screenings, and all of those things earn them what we call virtual currency, or boomer bucks. So from Sonic Boom, boomer bucks gets them monies in their bank that they have earned, and then they get to go shopping in a shopping mall to purchase items that they choose. So right now we have employees that are currently participating, 259. 99 of those employees have registered their mobile phone or device where they can get push messaging and see the app right there on their phone. And 75 of them have completed a health assessment, which is just an online questionnaire that asks you about your overall health and health goals, etc. Edward Lance, big kudos to him, and Director Ambles, working along with our nurse, Betsy Noda Kirby, that we talked about, and finding the perfect person that was capable of taking on this new wellness coordinator position. Edward came from the county. He knows the county, and he knows all about parks and recreation, and he was a perfect fit, somebody that's going to grow with the county, move up, and bring better health and initiatives. So we're excited about that. We also launched the Weight Watchers program. It was launched last year, but it was only open to the first 100 people that enrolled. And we saw the interest in that. There were a lot of people still showing interest. So the decision was made to make it available to many more. So we opened it up to all employees, full-time and part-time. And already we have 161 members and 157 who are actively engaged and have actually lost a total of 103 pounds so far this year. So again, this is where the pride comes in, when we see the improvement in these members taking interest in their own health and well-being. We take a lot of pride in that. Okay, next slide. So this one is about, again, more things that we're doing to create a better, healthier workforce. And one of the first things that we felt was important is to have a training session for supervisors who are taught to recognize when an employee, fellow associate, might be having either emotional problems or mental health types of issues, financial issues, whatever. It's an awareness that they gain by going through this course. We hosted the course 3 different times, and we had 25 attendees each time, so we have 75 members of Clayton County that were supervisors who are now able to assist with employees when they recognize there might be a problem and provide them with those resources. We think it's super important for somebody to know that they have somebody to go to. I think the stigma of mental health is changing, that people now look to their employer for this kind of help, which leads us right to the next item, which is your employee assistance program. We have arranged with Cigna Behavioral Health to have 8 face-to-face counseling sessions, whether it's face-to-face or video. It's still 8 to 8, 8 face-to-face. So your employees can do this confidentially, dial the number, get connected with a person that's there to help them, whether it's elder care issues, financial issues, emotional issues, health, behavioral, substance abuse. They've got access to that, and it's held in complete confidence. The other thing we did was to speak to the board about the public safety individuals working at the county. There's 900 or more, there's some open spaces, but 900 or more people that are in public safety that we feel should be recognized for the contribution that they make. I heard some of this earlier as we heard others speak about the efforts for the police department, the fire department, and so on. So these are the people that we're thinking of. We feel that they have earned the right to have additional life insurance. So this is a $25,000 life and accidental death policy that is paid for by the county. So these people are automatically enrolled as they come into our system. with an identifier of public safety. We automatically enroll them in that benefit, and they have $25,000 in proceeds that would be paid out to their named beneficiary in the event of their death. So that's in place. We did conduct a study, a well-being feasibility study, basically for a clinic. Would it make sense for the clinic to be on site for Clayton County employees to access? If it were there, would they come? Make sense financially? Does it make sense culturally? All of those things. So we did do a study, and we presented the ROI and all of the information, and we're going to continue to stay on top of that and look to that as something that will be up for consideration. The other thing that we did, and this is again Director Amble's, the Shoe Giveaway Wellness Initiative was launched. We had 790 employees who received a pair of Nike shoes from the funding of that with wellness funds. So we got Anthem to step up and Kaiser to step up, and it was about $100,000 that was given to support the initiative of giving those employees shoes so that they can participate in the Chairman's Walk and some other thing. We also did a lunch and learn. Kaiser presented that. There was a woman who was a doctor, an OBGYN, and she did a health talk in May of 2022. I think we had about 87 or so on the phone. I participated in it, some great information. So those are things that we're doing that we think are outstanding and compared to our peers.
Thank you, Maureen.
All right, how much longer is this?
So some areas that we think the county could improve upon, and this is directly out of our PATH Data Analytics Consulting Department. We pull the data from your Anthem self-funded medical plan. Our medical director and his team has the same claims data as the Anthem underwriter and their team does. And so this is a snapshot of your data, and this is for your Anthem self-funded medical plan, which is about half of your insured members. And this data most recently was from April of 2020 through March of 2021. So this is very current, very recent. What I can tell you about your group of the Anthem insureds is that 42% of them have a chronic condition. And the chronic conditions, the top three that we defined, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, 251. Lipidemia, which is high cholesterol levels, there were 102. And you had 52 that have type 2 diabetes. It may be hard to see, but the blue box under population health, behavioral health, 274 members had a behavioral health condition. That's about a 2% decrease compared to last year when we were in the middle of COVID. Behavioral health spend increased 41%, and anxiety and depression were the primary drivers of behavioral health. 61% of all the telemedicine or virtual visits were behavioral health claims. And so when we put in the enhanced EAP program, there's a very specific reason for that. We put in the wellness plan to address some of these issues. I don't know if you've ever heard of a medical condition called metabolic syndrome, but it is a group of 5 conditions that can lead to heart disease, diabetes, stroke, and other serious health problems. And so those 5 conditions are an increased waist circumference or belly fat, high triglycerides, elevated blood sugar, elevated blood pressure, or low HDL cholesterol, which is good cholesterol. If you have 3 or more of those conditions, you are far more likely to have serious health conditions later on, which translates directly into your healthcare spend is more. And you're self-funded, and so you're going to pay the first $100,000 and I believe it's $50,000 in health claims before the specific stop-loss carrier steps in and takes over from there. So all of the information that you heard about previously about the wellness plan and about the biometric screenings and about some of the wellness activities is to specifically address this condition called metabolic syndrome. According to the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, heart attack patients pay $21,500 for hospital stays, and then if you had any sort of complications, that could easily go over $100,000. We're trying to avoid those hospital stays, which saves the county money. And so how do we do that? First, we identify the population that's at risk, and the next thing is we put in programs like we've discussed previously. This is a snapshot of a claims study that was done by Kaiser Permanente for your 2021 claims data. And if you look at the column in the middle, your results as of Q4 2021. So this is the other half of your insured membership. And what we knew or know about them is that 83% of them, adults, were either overweight or obese. 45% of the children that were insured were overweight or obese. 75% of adults were not meeting minimum exercise standards. 32% are pre-diabetic, and 31% have elevated cholesterol. 12% have high blood pressure, and about 11% have smoke. You can compare that to your regional averages and industry averages, but these are the things that concern us and that we're trying to get better at to get your employees moving and to do the things to first help them identify what their numbers are, and then secondly, to take some proactive steps for that. So here are some strategies for 2023 as we approach your renewal cycle. You'll see in the top right-hand corner a lot of people running or walking. I don't run anymore, but I do walk. And so the mission statement of the wellness plan is to establish a culture of well-being for our employees and their families by implementing educational and motivational programs, strategies, and initiatives to promote quality of life. That Sonic Boom platform that you heard about is the same platform that Gwinnett County uses. So Clayton County is adopting best-in-class technology to hopefully get people excited or motivated to take action. If we're able to do that, then the vision statement is to establish a wellness and health program that will become a model program beyond Clayton County. And so we've laid the foundation, the groundwork to start doing that. How do we get people excited, educated and excited about ways to earn, is it Boomer Bucks? Boomer Bucks to take action. Well, the first one is to participate in Chairman Turner's 5K run walk on August the 27th. I saw some literature on that. I think it said 7 a.m. was the start time, which I'm probably going to have some eye boogers on Saturday morning, but I'll have to get those out and get down here for that. Anthem's sponsoring the event at the silver level, Kaiser at the gold, we're at the bronze. All of us will be here participating, and so we're excited about that. The Walk into Wellness event, 794 registered participants. And then the Kaiser events, a run, walk, roll, September the 1st at Piedmont Park. These programs take a little bit of time. You know, you get some momentum going and you get some excitement around them, and people start getting some rewards and they start to take off. Here are some cost savings opportunities as well. A couple of years ago, about this time, we suggested that you consider an alternative to one of the Medicare supplement carriers. And there was about a $200,000 savings annually that was on the table, and the decision was made to postpone that. I'm glad to see that the employee committee is put together. That was one of the requests that was made. We think that there might be some savings. If we look historically, $200,000 a year over the last 2 years would be about $400,000. One of the things that we recently asked the Human Resources Department to do was to consider moving the payroll deduction date forward by a month. Forever and ever amen, they took out payroll deductions a month prior to when they were due. And that was handcuffing us relative to the stop loss because we had to have everything done really by November, by Thanksgiving, in order for that first payroll deduction to be taken out on December the 1st. They agreed to defer that until January the 1st. Every other client in our book of business does that. That will allow us to negotiate your stop loss renewal. We have to have claims data through September the 30th. We get that on or around October the 15th, and they will firm up or lock in your stop loss rates. Last year, we left about $130,000 on the table because we had to accept the Anthem stop loss renewal. So we think that'll help us moving forward as well. I'd like for you to consider increasing the spousal surcharge for covering your dependents. Today, if you are an employee of the county and your spouse works somewhere else and they have access to health insurance, you allow those employees to insure those spouses here. They pay a $50 surcharge to do that. I would submit to you that the county is subsidizing the cost of health care for other employers. By way of example, at Marsh McLennan Agency, my spouse may not be insured under our health insurance plan because she's a school teacher and she has access to health insurance at her place of employment. That's an exclusion which we're not suggesting that you do, but we are suggesting that you consider raising the spousal surcharge from $50 to $100 a month. It's not been raised in many years. The $100 a month spousal surcharge is in line with public sector norm. We can provide extensive benchmarking around that, but understand there may be some abrasion or some noise there. But we think that it may help to prevent you from subsidizing the cost of health care at your employee's spouse's place of employment. We also think that it might be prudent to do a dependent eligibility audit. It has not been done for more than 10 years. We have firms that specialize in this, and what we try to do is ensure that the people that are covered under your plan meet the definitions of eligibility. Claim savings are 1% to 3% a year. We generally will ramp up and announce that this is coming. Make sure that in open enrollment that you're covering your eligible dependents, and then after that in the following year we do a dependent eligibility audit, and if they're not eligible then they come off of the plan. It would only take one person that wasn't eligible to incur $100,000, $200,000 of claims to the cost of the plan is negligible, but the potential savings can be significant. And then lastly, to consider rewarding employees for certain wellness activities. You saw the Boomer Bucks earlier, but we could take that a step further and we could say, you know, we provide a very rich benefit package, specifically health insurance. The cost for that is relatively low, but we'd like for you to have a biometric screening or perhaps a physical exam annually. And if you choose not to do that, that's your choice. However, you'll pay more in premium for the health plan through payroll deductions. Or said another way, if you do those things and you know what your numbers are, then you'll pay a lower cost. It takes a little bit of time to ramp up, but we are preparing some ideas for the Human Resources Department and Director Ambles to consider to present back to you. But these are levers that you have to push and pull that can affect the outcome of your healthcare spend, and generally they're things that public sector county governments consider and some act on. In terms of new benefits, and we're almost done, employer paid life insurance is one. I know that there's been a focus in the past regarding wanting to enhance the life insurance coverage for your police and fire, and so we're going to talk more about that in just a minute. Additional voluntary benefits that we're looking at are pet insurance and a benefit resource card, which is a very enhanced discount card. Pet insurance you might look at and say, well, I don't know. I was kind of that way until I spent $3,000 on our new puppy at the vet to save his life. And they were nice enough to credit my card back $1,100, but net expense was about $1,900. So those will be some voluntary options. In terms of some benchmarking, I wanted to show you this. This is New York Life. Down at the very bottom, you'll see that they have 3,428 public sector, county and city government clients. And of those 3,428 of them, 3,100 of them have a non-contributory life insurance plan. That means they pay 100% of the cost of their life insurance, and only 10% require a contribution from the employees. So by far, non-contributory for a basic amount of coverage is very standard. So today, the county offers a rich life insurance program. The basic life insurance costs your employees $3.09 a month. If you buy the basic life, you'll also get the AD&D or accidental death and dismemberment of $25. You'll get an occupational death benefit of $25. And if you're a law enforcement officer, you'll get an additional $25,000, or your beneficiaries will. So a total potential death payout of $100,000. And then recently, you voted to add a new public safety benefit of $25,000. So the total payout potentially is $125,000. However, if you are a public safety employee, specifically a police officer, and you said, you know what, I'm going to pass. I don't really see the value in this. Or if some of your employees are faced with making that election to enroll in basic life insurance because of inflation of late, then the only thing that they would receive if they were died in the line of duty is the new public safety benefit of $25,000. They forego $100,000 of potential benefit. They also have to buy the basic life insurance in order to have access to the voluntary life insurance plan. So what we're suggesting for your consideration is today the total cost of the life insurance plan is $275,000. You pay 72% of that, which is $198,000, and the employees pay $77,000. However, you'll see down at the bottom that you have 693 employees, active employees, that are not enrolled in your basic life insurance plan. And they, I'm quite sure, some of them would be police and fire and public safety employees. So if you wanted to cover all full-time active employees as a condition of employment, you could do that. The cost of the rate per thousand goes down. The total cost goes up. Why? Because you have more volume. So the total cost of the plan would be $336,000 compared to your current cost of $198,000. So we've highlighted in yellow the additional expenditure is $139,000. But for that, what you would get is that Director Ambles and her team could say, as a condition of employment, all full-time active employees are going to receive $25,000 of basic life insurance, and with that, they avail themselves to accidental death and dismemberment, the occupational death benefit, law enforcement officer benefit, and public safety benefit. Unfortunately, I think that there was a police officer that was killed in the line of duty last year, and so in that example, moving forward, the payout would be $125,000. There are some nuances there if you're not a law enforcement officer or a public safety employee officer, and so we could go through those examples as needed. So our recommendations are as follows. The county spends, Karen Bohannon and Angela, it's not Jolly anymore, but that's how she's affectionately referred to as Jolly, spend an inordinate amount of time reconciling the bills because of this $3.09 of employee contribution. So we're suggesting, in order to be able to say all full-time active employees are insured and the benefits of that, as well as easing the administrative burden, it makes sense in order to do that. And when they're covered for basic life insurance, then they also have access to the voluntary life insurance plan, which would provide up to 5 times their income in life insurance, much of which is guarantee issue, meaning no physicals, no exams, no blood profile or urinalysis. So we just feel like it would be a way to bring the county more in line with what other county governments are doing, make it simpler, and also enhance the public safety and police and fire benefits simultaneously. Costs a little bit of money, but we think it's well worth the expenditure. I'll pause there and see what questions or comments you may have about our presentation.
All right, any questions, comments? I will just say I like some of the recommendations in reference to additional coverage for the employees, especially for public safety. So I appreciate the work that Ms. Ambles and team, as well as your team, are doing in that space. Are there any other questions or comments?
If I could approach the board, because I do want to provide some follow-up to what Jack said. And Jack, we do thank you all for your hard work and your partnership. I want to address the spousal surcharge. The reason that we are recommending, considering the board's approval of increasing it is because the data clearly show that the spouses are in fact driving the cost. So that particular consideration is not without making sure that we've taken a look at the data, and the data clearly shows that the spouses are driving the cost. Since I've been in this space, I've learned just how important the technology is for us to be able to look at the data to try to make informed recommendations to the board. I would also like to say, in regards to the dependent care audit that Jack mentioned, already in place is very strict protocols about adding a dependent. The employee cannot add the dependent him or herself. That can only be done by our benefits administration team, and they are not going to do it until we get the appropriate documents that are needed. Now, it's always good to self-check yourself. I like to do that all the time. I don't mind being called to the carpet to provide information and to answer the hard questions. But I did want to say that that is in place. Employees cannot add a dependent. That is done by the benefits team, and only when they have the appropriate documentation that we need. Karen, can you confirm that for me, just to be sure? Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. And last, I want to say that the shoe giveaway, the shoes have not been distributed yet. I don't want a mob at my office when I get there tomorrow. Our employees have been very excited about this, and they have been calling. We have gotten most orders in, but almost every department is missing some shoe, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 pairs, and we don't want to distribute it until we get all of the shoes and give them out at the same time. But I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Ambles. Any other questions? All right, well, again, thank you for the presentation and the work that you're doing here in Clayton County, and we stand adjourned.